The thoroughbrace of the conquered coach groaned under the strain of the descent, a sound like a dying animal that had been haunting Anna Cole for 300 miles. Inside the cab, the air was thick with the smell of damp wool, stale tobacco, and the unwashed bodies of 4 strangers. Outside, the wind hammered against the leather curtains, carrying the bite of a winter that was arriving too early in the high territories. It was October of 1873, and the world beyond the window was a vast, bruising expanse of brown hills that rolled upward into the sharp teeth of the mountains. The peaks in the distance were already dusted with white, cold and indifferent against a sky the color of a bruised plum. Anna shifted on the hard bench, her fingers tightening around the worn leather envelope in her lap. It was the only anchor she had left. Inside was the last letter Sarah had sent, dated 6 months ago. The paper was soft from reading and rereading, the ink slightly blurred where Anna's thumb had rested on the words home and safe. Come west. Annie, Sarah had written. The air is thin, but it is clean. I have a cabin near the timberline and a claim that is mine. It is hard, but it is better than the mills. Anna looked down at her boots. They were sturdy leather, bought with the very last of her wages in Philadelphia, but they looked fragile compared to the heavy, mud-caked footwear of the miner sleeping across from her. She felt small. She felt foolish, but she also felt a desperate, clawing hope that Sarah was right. The coach lurched violently, throwing Anna's shoulder against the wooden frame. The driver shouted something unintelligible from the box above, a curse lost to the wind. They were slowing down. Through the gap in the curtains, the brown hills gave way to a scarred valley floor. Granite Creek was not a town so much as a wound in the earth. It was a chaotic scatter of raw lumber and false front buildings clinging to the muddy banks of a river that ran gray with mine tailings. Coal smoke hung low over the rooftops, pressing down like a dirty gray blanket. The coach shuddered to a halt in front of a sprawling building with a sign that read Overland Hotel Stage. The door was flung open, letting in a gust of freezing air that smelled of horse sweat, manure, and the sharp tang of burning pine. End of the line, the driver croaked, his face hidden behind a scarf. Anna stepped down into the mud. The street was a churned soup of slush and filth that sucked at her heels. Men were everywhere, shouting at mules, hauling crates, standing in clusters on the boardwalks. They were rough men, faces darkened by soot and sun, their eyes hard and assessing. As Anna gathered her single carpet bag, she felt the weight of their stares. A woman alone, young and obviously from back east, was a curiosity. A woman alone with no one to meet her was prey. She kept her head down, clutching the letter, and made her way toward the only structure that looked official, a small building with a faded flag and the words Post Office stenciled on the glass. The interior was dim and smelled of dry paper and dust. A balding man with wire-rimmed spectacles sat behind a caged counter, sorting through a stack of envelopes with ink-stained fingers. He did not look up when the bell above the door chimed. "Excuse me," Anna said. Her voice sounded thin, swallowed by the silence of the room. The clerk paused, peering over his spectacles. He looked her over with a mixture of boredom and mild irritation. "I'm looking for my sister," Anna continued, stepping closer to the cage. "Sarah Cole. She wrote to me from here. She has a claim up near the pass." The clerk's expression shifted. The boredom vanished, replaced by a sudden, guarded stillness. He set the envelopes down slowly. "Cole," he repeated. "Yes." "Sarah Cole. Is there any mail for her? Or perhaps she left a message for my arrival." The man took a rag from his pocket and began to wipe his hands, avoiding her eyes. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Outside, a dog barked, sharp and rhythmic. "I am sorry, miss," the clerk said finally. "There is no mail." "But she is here?" Anna pressed, her heart beginning to hammer a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "She lives here?" The clerk sighed, a long exhale through his nose. He looked at her then, and there was a flicker of pity in his eyes that terrified her more than the rudeness had. Sarah Cole passed. "Ma'am, back in late spring." The floor seemed to tilt beneath Anna's feet. She gripped the edge of the counter, the rough wood digging into her palms. The room went gray at the edges. "Past?" she whispered. "You mean she is gone? Lung fever took her," the clerk said, his voice dropping to a rote monotone, as if he had said these words too many times before. It was a hard winter. She was up there alone in that cabin for too long before anyone found her. "No," Anna said. The word was a reflex, a rejection of the world reshaping itself into a nightmare. "She wrote to me. She said she was building a porch. She said she was planting a garden." The clerk reached under the counter and pulled out a thin, dusty file. He slid it across the wood. "This is what is left," he said. "There are unpaid taxes on the claim. And there is a note here from the surveyor about a boundary dispute. The land upriver. Well, it is not much account anyway. Too steep for cattle, too rocky for farming." Anna stared at the folder. It was too thin. A life could not be reduced to 3 sheets of paper and a tax bill. Sarah was the strong one. Sarah was the one who had pulled Anna out of the fire when the mill burned in '69. Sarah was the one who promised they would grow old drinking tea on a porch in the sun. "Where is she?" Anna asked, her voice trembling. "The churchyard," the clerk said, gesturing vaguely toward the hill behind the town. "The Reverend saw to it." Anna took the file. Her hands were numb. She turned and walked out of the post office, forgetting to thank him. The wind on the street felt colder now, biting through her thin woolen coat. She stood on the boardwalk, the chaos of the mining town swirling around her, feeling entirely hollowed out. She had $40 sewn into the lining of her corset and $4 in her coin purse. She had a carpetbag of clothes and a letter from a dead woman. She needed a place to think. She needed a place to weep where these hard-eyed men could not see her. She walked to the boarding house the clerk had pointed out, a 2-story clapboard building with peeling white paint. The woman who opened the door was wide and formidable, wearing an apron stained with grease. She blocked the entrance, looking Anna up and down with a critical sneer. "I need a room," Anna said. "For a few nights." The woman crossed her arms. "We do not take charity cases. I can pay," Anna said, lifting her chin. The woman did not move. "Single women do not last long in Granite Creek," she said, her voice like a rasp on stone. "Not unless they have a husband or a protector. This is a respectable house. We do not want trouble." "I am not trouble," Anna said. "I am here to settle my sister's affairs." The woman's eyes narrowed. "You are the Cole girl's sister?" "Yes." The woman let out a short, harsh laugh. "Then you best be careful. That land she died on has caused enough grief. You want a room? $2 a night, meals are extra, and no gentlemen visitors." Anna paid for 1 night. The room was tiny, smelling of damp plaster and lye soap. She sat on the edge of the narrow bed and stared at the wall. She did not cry. The shock was too deep for tears. It sat in her chest like a stone. Hunger eventually drove her out. It was evening, and the town had changed character. The work whistles had blown, and the street was filled with miners washing the dust from their throats. Music drifted from the saloons, tinny pianos and the scrape of fiddles. Anna found a small eating house near the livery stable. She bought a bowl of stew and a piece of hard bread, eating slowly, trying to make the food settle in her churning stomach. 2 men sat at the table behind her. They were speaking loudly, their voices slurred with whiskey. "Waste of good timber." One man was saying, "Harrow wants that upper ridge cleared by snowfall." "He will get it," the second man replied. "Now that the girl is dead, who is to stop him? The county will seize it for the back taxes, and Harrow will buy it for pennies." Anna froze, her spoon hovering halfway to her mouth. "Harrow," the first man grunted. "The man owns the mine, the bank, and the judge. He does not need to buy it. He just needs to wait." Speaking of waiting, the second man chuckled darkly. "You see the sheriff dragged that mountain devil in yesterday? The wild one? Aye, caught him poaching near the heavy timber. Or so they say. Harrow's foreman said he raised a shotgun at them. I heard he eats raw meat," the first man said. lowering his voice to a theatrical whisper that carried clearly to Anna's table. "I heard he killed 3 men up in the Bighorns just for looking at his traps. He is a wolf on 2 legs." The second agreed. "Sheriff Miller has him chained up like a bear. Going to the labor auction tomorrow, I reckon." "Labor auction? New law. Judge Vance says if you cannot pay your fine, you get sold to pay the court. 3 months, 6 months. Harrow will likely buy him just to break him. Or hang him." Anna set her spoon down. Her hands were shaking. Harrow. The name felt heavy, like a boot on a neck. This man Harrow wanted Sarah's land. He was waiting for the taxes to come due. She touched the pocket where the tax notice lay. The sum was $12. She had enough to pay it. But paying the tax would not save the land if she could not reach it, could not prove the boundaries, could not live on it to hold the claim. And she could not go up there alone. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. She was a seamstress from Philadelphia. She did not know how to fire a gun. She did not know how to build a fire in a blizzard. If she went up that mountain alone, she would die just as Sarah had. She needed a guide. She needed protection. She left the eating house and walked out into the dark. The street was rowdier now. A bottle smashed against a wall. A man whistled at her from a balcony. Anna kept her eyes forward, her heart pounding. She found the sheriff's office by the iron bars on the windows. A lantern hung outside the door, casting a yellow pool of light on the mud. Inside, the office was warm. A pot-belly stove glowed in the corner. Sheriff Miller sat behind a desk, whittling a piece of pine. He was a thick-set man with a mustache that hid his mouth and eyes that gave away nothing. "Can I help you, miss?" he asked, not setting down his knife. Anna stepped inside, closing the door against the wind. She looked past the sheriff, toward the back of the room. There was a heavy timber post in the center of the holding cell. Chained to it was a man. He was sitting on the floor, his long legs stretched out before him. He was huge, broad-shouldered and lean, with the heavy, dense muscle of a man who worked to survive. His clothes were buckskin and wool, stained with the earth and grease. His hair was a dark, tangled mane that fell past his shoulders, and his beard was thick and unkempt. He looked up as she entered. His eyes were startlingly light in his weather-beaten face, gray, like river ice. They were cold, wary, and utterly devoid of hope. "That is him?" Anna asked softly. "The wild man?" Sheriff Miller chuckled dryly. "That is Jonah Wilder. Though folks around here have other names for him. What did he do? Trespassing on Mr. Harrow's grazing land. Got into a dispute with the foreman." The man in the cell did not speak. He watched Anna with the intensity of a trapped animal, measuring the distance between them, measuring the threat. "The men in the eating house," Anna said, turning back to the sheriff. "They said he can be hired to pay his fine." The sheriff stopped whittling. He looked at Anna, really looked at her, for the first time. "It is a court order, Miss Indentured Labor, to pay off the county fine, but I would not recommend it, not for a lady. Jonah here is not housebroken." "How much is the fine?" Anna asked. The sheriff raised an eyebrow. $3. $3. It was the price of a good pair of boots. It was the price of a week's room and board. It was the price of a man's freedom. And what does the person who pays the fine get? Sheriff Miller shrugged. His labor. He belongs to the contract holder until the debt is worked off. Usually takes a month or 2 of hard labor. But like I said, Miss, this one is dangerous. He has lived alone in the high country for 10 years. He has forgotten how to be a man. Anna looked back at Jonah Wilder. He had looked away, staring at the floor, his wrists resting on his knees. The iron cuffs had rubbed the skin raw. She could see dried blood on the bone of his wrist. He looked defeated. He looked like Sarah felt in those last months at the mill, ground down by a machine too big to fight. But he was alive, and he knew the mountains. "Thank you, Sheriff," Anna said. She turned and walked out before her courage failed her. Back at the boarding house, the room was freezing. Anna lit the kerosene lamp and sat at the small table. She emptied her coin purse. $4 silver, a handful of cents. If she paid the fine, she would have $1 left. $1 to buy supplies, $1 to buy food. It was impossible, but the alternative was to turn around, to take the next stagecoach back east, to leave Sarah in the frozen ground and let a man named Harrow take the only thing her sister had ever owned. Anna touched the letter again. Come west. Annie. She thought of the men in the saloon. She thought of the landlady's sneer. Marry fast or be fair game. If she stayed in town without money, she would be forced into a marriage she did not want, or worse, if she went to the mountains, she might die. But if she hired the mountain man, he was big, he was terrifying, but he was an outcast. And right now, Anna Cole was an outcast too. She did not sleep. She lay in the dark, listening to the wind rattle the window pane. Her hand clenched around the $3 silver until the metal grew warm against her palm. Morning broke gray and sullen. The clouds were lower today. Hugging the tops of the hills, the air smelled of snow. The courthouse was a simple wooden building with a pot-belly stove and rows of benches. It was already crowded when Anna arrived. Harrow's men were there. She recognized the loud ones from the eating house. They sat in the back, leaning against the wall, chewing tobacco and snickering. At the front of the room sat a man who radiated ownership. He wore a tailored suit and a silk vest. His hair was silver, slicked back with oil. This was Harrow. He looked bored, tapping a gold ring against the arm of his chair. Judge Vance pounded a gavel. He looked tired. Bring out the prisoner. The side door opened. Sheriff Miller led Jonah Wilder into the room. Jonah was shackled at the ankles now, shuffling with short, heavy steps. He kept his head down, his hair falling over his face like a curtain. He did not look at the crowd. He stood before the bench, silent and massive. Jonah Wilder. The judge read from a paper. You are charged with trespassing, poaching livestock, and threatening a citizen with a firearm. How do you plead? Jonah said nothing. He did not even raise his head. The judge sighed. Silence is an admission. The fine is set at $3, plus court costs. Can you pay? Jonah stood like a stone. Very well, the judge said. Under the Territorial Relief Act, the prisoner is offered for labor contract to satisfy the debt. Does anyone present wish to assume the debt? Harrow smiled. It was a slow, predatory curving of the lips. He signaled to one of his men. The room was silent. Everyone knew how this ended. Harrow would take him. Harrow would work him until he broke or died. Anna stood up. Her legs felt like water. Her heart was beating so hard she thought it would be visible through her dress. I will pay it, she said. Her voice was not loud, but it cut through the room like a bell. Every head turned. The silence that followed was absolute. Then, a ripple of sound, gasps, whispers, a low rumble of laughter. Harrow twisted in his seat to look at her. His smile faltered, then returned, sharper this time. Judge Vance peered over his spectacles. Step forward, young woman. Anna walked up the center aisle. She felt the eyes of the men on her back. She felt the heat rising in her cheeks, burning her skin. You wish to assume the prisoner's debt? The judge asked. Yes, Your Honor. Do you understand the terms? You are responsible for his room and board. He is bound to your service until the fine is satisfied. I understand, someone in the back shouted. She is buying herself a husband. Laughter exploded in the room. Crude, ugly laughter. Maybe she just wants a warm night, another voice called. Order! The judge banged his gavel. Order! Anna stood rigid. She did not look at the crowd. She looked at Jonah. He had lifted his head. He was looking at her now. His expression was one of utter bewilderment. The cold indifference was gone, replaced by a shock so profound it looked like pain. The judge looked at Anna with pity. This is highly irregular. Miss, but the law is the law. $3. Anna opened her purse. Her fingers trembled as she took out the 3 heavy silver coins. She placed them on the judge's bench. They made a loud clack in the sudden quiet. Release him, the judge ordered. Sheriff Miller stepped forward with a key. The shackles fell from Jonah's wrists and ankles with a heavy clang. Jonah rubbed his wrists slowly. He did not move away from the post. He just stared at Anna. "Come with me," the sheriff said, guiding them both to a side table to sign the papers. Harrow stood up and walked over. He stopped near Anna, looming over her. He smelled of expensive bay rum and stale cigar smoke. "You are making a mistake, girl," Harrow said smoothly. "That man is an animal. If you need help with your situation, you should have come to me." Anna looked up at him. Her eyes were dry and hot. "I prefer to choose my own help. Mr. Harrow." Harrow's eyes went cold. "Enjoy your purchase. Then, the winter is long up there." He turned and walked out, his men trailing behind him like a pack of dogs. The sheriff pushed a piece of paper toward Anna. "Sign here." Anna signed her name. Anna Cole. The letters looked shaky. The sheriff handed her a crumpled copy. "There you are. He is yours." Anna turned to Jonah. He was standing a few feet away, towering over her. Up close, he smelled of wood smoke and old sweat, but also of pine resin. He was terrifyingly large. He looked down at her. His voice, when it came, was a low rumble, rusty from disuse. "You do not know what you are buying." It was not a question. It was a statement of fact. "No," Anna said, looking him in the eye. "I do not, but I have a claim up near the pass. My sister's claim. I need a guide to get me there, and I need someone to help me fix the roof." Jonah's brow furrowed. "You spent $3 to fix a roof?" "I spent $3 to stay alive. Mr. Wilder." He stared at her for a long moment. Then, he gave a nearly imperceptible nod. The sheriff cleared his throat. "Just so you know, Miss, read the fine print." Anna looked down at the paper in her hand. Buried in the dense legal language was a phrase she had not noticed before. "The laborer's service shall remain subject to the interests of town order, and may be revoked or reassigned by the guardian of affairs should the contract holder prove unable to maintain control." "Who is the guardian of affairs?" Anna asked, a cold knot forming in her stomach. "That would be Mr. Harrow," the sheriff said, a distinct lack of apology in his voice. Anna looked at the door where Harrow had exited. It was a trap, even now. It was a trap. "We should go," she said to Jonah. "Now." "Where is your gear?" Jonah asked. "At the boarding house." Jonah turned and walked toward the door. He moved differently now that he was unchained, a long, loping stride that ate up the ground. Anna had to hurry to keep up. They walked to the boarding house in silence. Anna retrieved her bag. The landlady watched from the parlor window, her face a mask of judgment. When they stepped back onto the street, the sky had turned a dark, bruised purple. The wind was picking up, whipping Anna's skirts around her legs. They walked out of town, past the saloons, past the last of the shacks. Men called out from the porches, "Watch your back, lady. Don't fall asleep." Anna kept her spine straight. She fixed her eyes on the back of Jonah's coat. She would not let them see her fear. Jonah did not look back. He walked with his head up now, sniffing the air like a wolf scenting a storm. He stopped at the livery stable only long enough to retrieve a mule that the sheriff had said belonged to him, a scrawny, tough-looking beast that bared its teeth at Anna. They reached the edge of the town. The road ended, turning into a rutted track that vanished into the foothills. Jonah stopped. He turned to face her. The wind blew his hair across his face. "It is going to snow," he said. "I know," Anna said. "It is a 2-day ride, 3 if the weather turns. We have 1 mule. You ride, I walk. I can walk," Anna said. Jonah looked at her boots. "You will walk until you cannot. Then you will ride." He turned his back on her and took the mule's lead rope. "Let's go." He began to walk. He did not wait to see if she was following. Anna took a breath. The air tasted of ice and sage. She gripped her bag, looked one last time at the ugly, smoking scar of the town, and then turned her face toward the mountains. The wilderness opened out before them, dark and huge and waiting. She took her first step. The wagon ruts of the mining road dissolved into nothing more than a deer trail within the first hour. The town of Granite Creek vanished behind a fold of the hills. swallowed by the landscape as if it had never existed, leaving Anna Cole alone in a silence so profound it felt heavy on her eardrums. The terrain was deceptive. From the stagecoach window, the brown hills had looked rolling and gentle, like sleeping bears. Underfoot, they were treacherous. The ground was a misery of loose shale and slick, dry grass that rattled like snake tails in the biting wind. Ravens circled high above, black specks against a sky that was slowly bleeding from bruised purple to a flat, hard gray. Anna struggled. There was no other word for it. Her boots, purchased in a respectable Philadelphia shop for walking on cobblestones, lacked the grip for this angled earth. The soles slid on the scree, sending cascades of pebbles skittering down into the ravines below. Her skirt, heavy wool meant for warmth, became a burden, snagging on the claw-like branches of sagebrush and low scrub oak. Jonah Wilder did not struggle. He moved through the country not as if he were walking on it, but as if he were part of it. He led the mule, a stubborn creature named Jasper, with a slack rope, his stride long and fluid. He seemed to know which rocks would hold his weight and which patch of grass hid a gopher hole without even looking down. He barely spoke. For the first few miles, the only sounds were the crunch of boots, the huff of the mule, and the wind hissing through the dry scrub. Jonah kept a distance of 10 yards between them, a gap that felt less like politeness and more like a defensive perimeter. Anna watched him, mostly because watching her own feet was making her dizzy. He carried his height with a tense readiness, his shoulders hunched slightly as if expecting a blow. The wind occasionally whipped the long, dark hair back from his neck, and Anna saw the flash of pale, jagged lines against his sun-darkened skin. Scars, old ones. She saw them on his hands. 2 fine white spiderwebs across his knuckles and a thicker rapier mark vanishing up his forearm under his sleeve. They were not the neat, surgical scars of a medical procedure. They were the frantic, messy marks of violence. She wondered what kind of battles had carved them there, and if the men in the saloon had been right about the 3 men he had killed. The thought made her stomach turn over, but she kept walking. She had paid $3. She had signed the paper. There was no going back. By late afternoon, the incline grew steeper. Anna's breath came in ragged gasps. The air was thinner here, lacking the heavy coal smoke thickness of the town, but also lacking oxygen. Her lungs burned. Jonah stopped ahead, near a cluster of twisted pines that clung to the leeward side of a ridge. He did not turn around, but he held up a hand. "We camp here," he said. His voice was a low rumble, swallowed instantly by the vastness around them. Anna stumbled up to him, legs trembling. "Here? It is just a patch of dirt. It is out of the wind," Jonah said. "And there is water." He tied the mule to a low branch and began to unload the packs. Anna stood uselessly for a moment, hugging her arms against the chill that was seeping through her coat. The sun was dipping behind the peaks, and the temperature was plummeting. Jonah looked at her, his gray eyes unreadable. "Do not just stand there. The cold will kill you faster than hunger. Gather wood." Anna bristled slightly at the command, but she nodded. "Where?" "Dead branches only," he said, pointing to the undergrowth. "Nothing that is green. If it snaps, it burns. If it bends, leave it." She set about the task, grateful for the movement. She brought back an armful of dry pine and sage. Jonah took it without a word, arranging it in a small, precise pyramid against a rock face. He struck a lucifer match against his thumbnail, sheltered the flame with his large, cupped hands, and coaxed the tinder into life. "Watch," he said. Anna watched. "You bank the fire against the stone," he explained. His sentences clipped. "The stone holds the heat, throws it back at you while you sleep. If you build it in the open, the wind takes it all." He showed her how to lay her bedroll, a canvas tarp and 2 heavy blankets, in the hollow between the fire and a heavy log. "Tuck the ends under," he said. "If the air gets in, you will wake up with frost on your eyelashes." Anna sat on the bedroll, holding her hands out to the flames. The warmth was a physical relief so intense it almost hurt. Jonah sat on the other side of the fire, cleaning his rifle with a rag he had pulled from his pocket. The firelight danced on the metal barrel and in the hollows of his face. "Why do they call you wild?" Anna asked. The question slipped out before she could check it. Jonah's hands stilled on the rifle. He did not look up. "Because it is easier than calling me a man," he said. Anna waited, but he said nothing more. He went back to polishing the steel, the rhythm hypnotic. That night, the darkness was absolute. There were no street lamps, no glow from neighbors' windows, just a crushing, suffocating blackness overhead, pierced by stars so bright and numerous they looked like spilled salt. From the ridges above them came a sound that made Anna bolt upright, a high, yipping howl that multiplied until it sounded like 100 demons laughing in the dark. "Coyotes." Jonah's voice came from the shadows. "They are singing to the moon. They will not come close." Anna lay back down, pulling the scratchy wool blanket up to her chin. She listened to the crackle of the fire and the steady, rhythmic breathing of the man a few feet away. She was alone in the wilderness with a man who had been chained to a post 24 hours ago. A man she had technically purchased. By all the rules of the society she had left behind in Philadelphia, she should be terrified. But as she watched the silhouette of his back against the firelight, she realized she was not afraid of him. In town, with the drunk miners and the leering landlady, she had felt like a piece of meat. Here, in the dark, Jonah ignored her completely. He was a sentinel, a part of the landscape. She felt safer here, with the coyotes and the cold, than she had in the boarding house. The realization was strange, unsettling. She closed her eyes and let the exhaustion pull her under. The second day began with a brutal lesson in geography. The trail dipped down into a ravine cut by a rushing creek. The water was black and fast, churning over white stones. Ice clung to the banks in jagged shelves. "We cross here," Jonah said. Anna looked at the water. It looked angry. "Is there a bridge?" Jonah looked at her as if she had asked if there was a ballroom. No. He led the mule across first. The animal balked, then plunged in, the water swirling around its knees. Jonah navigated the slippery rocks with practiced ease, turning back once he reached the far bank. "Step on the flat stones," he called out. "Do not hesitate. If you stop, you slide." Anna gathered her skirts in one hand, clutching her bag in the other. She stepped onto the first stone. It was slick with algae and ice. The cold of the water radiated up through her boot soles. She took another step. The water rushed around her ankles, tugging at her skirts. "Keep moving," Jonah commanded. She took a third step, aiming for a large, flat rock in the center. Her boot landed, but the moss gave way. Her foot shot out from under her. Anna cried out, flailing. She hit the water hard, the freezing shock of it punching the air from her lungs. The current grabbed her, dragging her toward a drop-off where the water foamed white. A hand clamped around her forearm. It was not a gentle grip. It was iron. It was unyielding. Jonah had moved with terrifying speed, wading back into the torrent. He hauled her upright with a single heave, pulling her against him to stabilize her against the current. For a heartbeat, they were pressed together. Anna was gasping, blinded by water and hair. She felt the solid, immovable wall of his chest against her. She felt the heat of him through his wet buckskins. His wet hair dripped onto her cheek. She looked up. His face was inches from hers. His eyes were wide, the pupils blown dark. He was breathing hard, a warm huff of air against her frozen skin. Her own heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Fear, yes, but something else, too, a sudden, sharp awareness of his strength, the sheer, overwhelming reality of him. "You are all right," he said, his voice rough. He held her there for a second longer than necessary, his grip tightening on her arm. Then, as if realizing what he was doing, he let go as if her skin had burned him. He stepped back, water sluicing off his legs. His jaw tightened, a muscle jumping in his cheek. "Move," he snapped, turning his back on her, "before you freeze." He splashed to the bank and did not offer a hand to help her up the muddy slope. Anna scrambled out, shivering violently, her dress heavy with water. She looked at him, but he was busy checking the mule's cinch, refusing to look in her direction. "We have to keep moving," he said to the mule. "The heat of walking will dry you." He was right, but his voice was cold. It was the voice of a man who had let a wall slip and was hastily rebuilding it, brick by brick. They walked for hours. The exercise warmed Anna's muscles, but her clothes remained damp and clammy, and the sky was changing. The gray clouds that had been hovering on the horizon suddenly surged forward, rolling over the peaks like a tidal wave. The temperature dropped 10 degrees in 10 minutes. The wind picked up, changing its tune from a whistle to a roar. Jonah stopped, looking up at the sky. He cursed under his breath. A sharp, ugly sound. "What is it?" Anna asked, her teeth starting to chatter. "Too early," Jonah muttered. "It is too early for this." He looked around, scanning the ridges. "Harrow's men," he said, spitting into the dirt. "They have been driving cattle into the high pastures too late in the season, stirring up the dust, changing the thermals. The mountain is angry. Snow began to fall. Not the gentle, drifting flakes of a Christmas card, but heavy, wet clumps that stung like hail. The wind drove them sideways. "We cannot make the pass," Jonah shouted over the wind. "We need shelter. Now!" He abandoned the trail, dragging the mule up a steep, rocky incline toward a limestone ridge. Anna scrambled after him, slipping on the snow that was already coating the rocks. "Up there," he pointed. A narrow overhang jutted out from the cliff face, a shallow cave, barely deep enough to keep the snow off. They scrambled into the shelter just as the white curtain of the storm slammed down on the world. The view of the valley was erased. There was only whiteness and the howling wind. Jonah worked with frantic efficiency. He unloaded the mule and shoved the animal into the deepest corner of the overhang. He pulled brush and deadwood from the surrounding scrub, building a fire pit against the back wall. Anna sank onto a flat rock. The adrenaline of the climb was fading, replaced by a deep, bone-aching cold. Her wet dress was freezing stiff. She wrapped her arms around herself, shaking so hard her vision blurred. Jonah got the fire going, a small, fierce blaze that fought back the gloom. He looked over at her. "You are shaking," he said. "I am fine," Anna stammered. "You are lying," he said flatly. He stood up and moved toward her. He unrolled her blankets and draped them over her shoulders, but she continued to shudder. Her hair, soaked from the river and the snow, hung down her back like icy ropes, soaking into her dress. Jonah stood over her, looking down with a mixture of frustration and something that looked like pained reluctance. "You will freeze with that ice hanging on you," he muttered, almost angry at himself. "Sit down, closer to the fire." "I am sitting," she whispered. "Turn around," he commanded. Anna turned on the rock, facing the fire. She felt him settle behind her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, blocking the wind. He reached out. His large, work-rough hands hesitated for a fraction of a second before touching her hair. He began to comb through the tangled, wet strands with his fingers. Anna stiffened at first. It was an intimacy she had not expected. No man had touched her hair since she was a child, but Jonah's touch was not grasping. It was practical, rhythmic, and shockingly gentle. He separated the strands, shaking out the ice, holding them toward the fire's warmth. The heat of the flames and the heat of his hands began to seep into her scalp. "You have a lot of hair," he murmured. It was the first thing he had said that wasn't an order or a warning. "My mother said it was a nuisance," Anna said, her voice trembling less now. "She said it was vanity." "Your mother was wrong," Jonah said. "It keeps you warm." He began to braid it. He worked slowly, methodically. He divided the heavy mass into 3 sections. His fingers wove them together, over, under, tight enough to hold but loose enough to dry. The silence in the small cave shifted. It was no longer the silence of 2 strangers trapped by a contract. It was a hushed, heavy silence, filled with the crackle of the fire and the sound of the storm raging helplessly outside. Anna's breathing slowed. She closed her eyes, leaning back slightly, almost unconsciously, into the pressure of his hands. The sensation was overwhelming. Safety and heat. It felt like being anchored. "I had sisters," Jonah said quietly. His voice was so low she almost missed it. You did? 3 of them. Sarah, Ruth, and little Mary. Sarah, Anna whispered. That was my sister's name. Jonah's hands paused in their work, then resumed. I used to braid Mary's hair, before church on Sundays. My mother had arthritis in her hands. She couldn't manage the plaits. You lived here, in these mountains? Further north, he said, a valley called Sweetgrass. It was good land. We had a cabin, a barn. What happened? Anna asked. The silence stretched out, taut as a bowstring. Fire, Jonah said. The word was a piece of gravel in his throat. Not a forest fire. Men? Harrow's men? No, another man. Another rich man who wanted water rights. They came in the night. They barred the door from the outside. Anna's breath hitched. Oh, God, I was 17, Jonah said, his voice devoid of inflection, which made it worse. I was in the barn. I heard the glass break. I smelled the kerosene. I smelled the pine burning. And then I smelled them. His hands were still moving in her hair, but they were trembling slightly. I got the door open, he said, but the roof came down. I pulled them out, but they were gone. All of them. Anna turned her head slightly, trying to see his face, but he kept his eyes on the braid. They blamed me. He said I said it. Said I was a wild boy who went mad. It was easier than hanging the rich man's son who held the torch. So I ran, and I have been running ever since. Anna felt tears prick her eyes, hot and stinging. The monster the town talked about, the man who ate raw meat and killed for sport, was just a boy who had burned his hands trying to save his sisters. My sister. Sarah, Anna said, her voice thick. We worked in a textile mill. In Philadelphia, the noise. It was so loud you couldn't think. The lint filled the air like snow. It filled your lungs. She looked into the fire. We slept in the same bed. We used to whisper at night about going west, about seeing mountains. About silence. I promised her I would come with her, but I was afraid. I wanted to save more money. I wanted to be safe. So she came alone. She swallowed hard. If I had come with her, maybe she wouldn't have been alone when she got sick. Maybe she wouldn't be in that frozen ground. Jonah finished the braid. He tied the end with a strip of leather from his pocket. The grief hung in the air between them. A third presence in the cave. 2 people broken by fire and sickness and the indifference of the world. Jonah rested his hand on the back of her neck for a second. It might have been an accident. His thumb brushed the soft skin at the nape of her neck. Heat shot down Anna's spine, sharp and electric. It was not just warmth. It was a sudden, piercing awareness of him as a man. Jonah flinched. He pulled his hand back as if he had touched a hot stove. He scrambled backward, putting distance between them, his shoulders rigid. The fire needs wood, he said roughly. He moved to the edge of the overhang, staring out into the blinding white of the storm, his back to her. Anna sat alone by the fire, touching the braid he had made. It was tight and neat. It felt like a vow. The storm raged all night. The wind howled like a living thing, tearing at the stone. They slept closer that night, not touching, but the gap between their bedrolls had shrunk from 10 feet to 2. Anna lay awake for a long time. She could hear Jonah breathing. The rhythm was jagged at first, then smoothed out as he fell asleep. She could feel the awareness of his body like a low hum in the air, a magnetic pull that was both terrifying and comforting. They were no longer just a woman and a hired hand. They were accomplices in survival. The transaction of the $3 felt miles away, buried under the snow. The next morning broke cold and brilliant. The storm had passed as quickly as it had come, leaving the world scoured clean and buried in white. Jonah was already up, boiling coffee in a tin pot over the fire. He did not look at her as she sat up. "Drink," he said, handing her a tin cup. "We have a hard climb." He seemed to have rebuilt his walls overnight. He was brisk, efficient, distant, but when he helped her saddle the mule, his hand lingered for a second on the leather strap near hers. They climbed out of the timberline and onto the spine of the ridge. The snow was knee-deep in places, powdery and blindingly bright under the sun. As they walked, Jonah began to speak again, haltingly. He seemed to feel he owed her an explanation after the night before. "Harrow," he said, breaking a long silence. "He has been trying to clear the high country for 2 years. He wants the timber and the water rights for his mines." "Is that why he hates you?" Anna asked, struggling to match his pace in the deep snow. "He hates me because I know where he buries his mistakes," Jonah said. "I saw his foreman branding calves that didn't belong to him. I saw them divert the creek that fed the homesteaders' valley, and the sheriff said you killed 3 men. Jonah stopped. He turned to look at her. The sun reflected in his gray eyes, making them look like polished steel. "They came for me," he said. 3 of them. Bounty hunters Harrow paid to clear the squatters. They shot my dog. They burned my lean-to. He looked out over the valley. His jaw set. "I did not hunt them, Anna, but I did not let them kill me. The town, they prefer the story where I am the monster. It makes them feel better about letting Harrow own them." Anna looked at him. The worn buckskins, the wild hair, the stillness of him. She saw the outcast. She saw the scapegoat. "I believe you," she said. Jonah looked at her, surprised. "You should not. It is safer to believe them." "I am tired of being safe," Anna said. Jonah held her gaze for a long moment. Then, for the first time, the corner of his mouth twitched. It wasn't quite a smile, but the ice in his eyes cracked. "Come," he said. "Look," he pointed ahead. They crested the final rise. The world fell away beneath them. Before them lay a high alpine basin, a bowl of white snow cradled by jagged, granite peaks that pierced the blue sky. In the center of the basin, nestled against the dark line of a spruce forest, was a small clearing. A chimney rose from a drift of snow. A roofline, patched and crooked, peeked out. "There," Jonah said softly. "The coal claim." Anna stopped. She felt the breath leave her body. It was desolate. It was buried in winter. It looked impossibly lonely. But it was there. It was real. Sarah's dream. The wind whipped Anna's hair across her face. She felt very small against the scale of the mountains, a speck of dust in a cathedral of rock and ice. But as she looked at the cabin, she felt a fierce, hot spark in her chest. She looked at Jonah. He was watching the tree line, scanning for danger, his body angled to protect her from the wind. She had paid $3 for a monster. She had found a man who braided hair and stood between her and the cold. "We made it," she whispered. "Not yet," Jonah said, his eyes narrowing as he watched the distant trees. "But we are close." He offered her a hand to help her over the ridge. This time, when his fingers closed around hers, he did not pull away immediately. He held her hand, steady and warm, pulling her up toward the home that was waiting for them. The cabin was not the sanctuary Anna had pictured in her dreams during the long, rattling journey from Philadelphia. It was a scar on the hillside, a small, weather-beaten box of gray timber half swallowed by the earth itself. It sat in the shadow of a looming granite peak, tucked into a grove of spruce trees that blocked the sun for most of the day. The roof was a patchwork of slate and rough-cut shingles, weighed down by heavy stones to keep the wind from stripping it bare. The fence that marked the claim was leaning drunkenly, the posts rotted at the base, half buried in drifts of old, hardened snow that had never quite melted from the season before. Jonah stopped the mule at the edge of the clearing. He did not speak. He just looked at the structure with a critical, narrowed gaze, assessing its ability to hold back the winter. Anna slid down from the saddle, her boots sinking into the crust of the snow. The wind here was different than in the valley. It was a constant, low moan that threaded through the spruce boughs, a sound like a bow being drawn across a cello string, over and over, without resolving the chord. She walked to the door. It hung crookedly on leather hinges. She pushed it open. The air inside was stagnant and freezing, colder somehow than the air outside. It smelled of wood ash, damp earth, and rodents. But underneath that, faint and heartbreaking, was the scent of lavender soap. The same soap Sarah had used since they were girls sharing a wash basin in a tenement room. Anna stepped into the gloom. The cabin was one room, perhaps 12 feet by 15. There was a stone hearth, cold and black, a rough table with one chair, a narrow bed frame built into the wall, covered with a straw tick that had been chewed by mice. On a shelf near the window, Anna found them. A stack of folded calico dresses, the fabric stiff with cold, a wooden sewing box with the lid slightly askew, and a small, black Bible. She picked up the book. Her fingers were numb. But she managed to open the cover. On the flyleaf, in a handwriting that Anna knew as well as her own, was written, Sarah Elizabeth Cole, her book, Granite Creek, Montana Territory, 1871. The reality of it struck Anna with the force of a physical blow. Sarah was not coming back. Sarah was not out gathering wood or fetching water. Sarah was gone, and this pile of cold, abandoned things was all that remained of her laughter and her strength. Anna's legs gave way. She sank onto the edge of the narrow bed, clutching the Bible to her chest. A sob ripped out of her, harsh and jagged. Then another. She curled forward, rocking herself, the tears freezing on her cheeks before they could fall. She was vaguely aware of a shadow in the doorway. Jonah stood there, filling the frame, blocking out the gray light. He held a rifle in one hand and a pack in the other. He watched her for a moment, his face unreadable, his body tense. He did not come to her. He did not offer empty words or awkward pats on the shoulder. He seemed to understand that grief was a private country, and he had no passport to enter it. Instead, he turned and leaned the rifle against the wall. He set the pack down. He walked to the hearth and knelt, pulling his knife to shave kindling from a piece of dry pine. The sure sound of the blade against the wood was rhythmic and steady. He built a fire, coaxing the cold chimney to draw. When the flames were licking up the soot-stained stones, he stood and went to the door. He examined the leather hinges, testing the rot. He went back out to the mule, returning with a hammer and a pouch of nails. Anna cried until there were no tears left, only a hollow ache in her chest. All the while, Jonah moved around her, a silent whirlwind of repair. He fixed the door so it would shut tight against the wind. He stuffed rags into the gaps between the logs where the chinking had fallen out. He brought in armload after armload of wood, stacking it high against the wall until the room smelled of fresh pitch and fire smoke instead of neglect. It was a language Anna understood. He was not giving her pity. He was giving her heat. He was giving her shelter. In a world that had taken everything from her, he was ensuring the wind could not get in. The routine established itself within the week, born of necessity and the brutal geometry of survival. The cabin was their universe. Outside, the world was hostile. The winter came down hard and fast, earlier than the calendar said it should. The snow did not stop. It piled up against the logs, rising past the windowsill, turning the interior into a perpetual twilight. Jonah was the provider. He left before dawn, checking the trap line he had set along the creek, hunting for snowshoe hares or the occasional grouse. He moved through the drifts on snowshoes he had fashioned from ash wood and rawhide, a ghost in the white silence. Anna was the keeper. She scrubbed the cabin floor with sand and hot water. She mended the torn tick on the bed and stuffed it with fresh spruce boughs and dry grass Jonah dug out from under the snow. She learned to cook with the meager supplies they had brought, dried beans, flour, lard, and whatever meat Jonah brought home. They rationed everything. Coffee was a luxury, boiled until it was bitter black and drunk only in the morning. Sugar was a memory. They ate twice a day, small portions that left a hollow space in the stomach, a constant reminder of how thin the line was between living and dying. Survival bound them together. They moved around each other in the small space like two planets in a tight orbit, careful not to collide but held in place by gravity. Often, the blizzards were so fierce they could not leave the cabin for days. The wind screamed like a banshee, shaking the roof boards until dust sifted down onto the table. In those long, dark hours, the silence between them changed. It became less wary, more companionable. Jonah would sit by the fire, whittling triggers for his traps or greasing his boots. Anna would sew by the light of the flames, turning the worn fabric of her dresses, trying to make the thread last. Every movement mattered. Anna learned the rhythm of his breathing. She learned that he hummed when he was working with his hands, a tuneless, low vibration deep in his chest that he seemed unaware of. She learned that he drank his coffee scalding hot, wincing slightly as it went down, as if the heat proved he was still alive. She also learned his fears. One afternoon, a loud crack echoed from the river below, the sound of the ice shifting and settling under its own weight. It sounded like a gunshot. Jonah was across the room, sharpening his knife. At the sound, he flinched so violently he dropped the stone. He spun toward the door, crouching low, his eyes wide and feral, his hand going for a pistol that wasn't on his hip. It took him a full 10 seconds to realize where he was. He looked at Anna, who had frozen with her needle in midair. He saw the concern in her face, and the shame washed over him, turning his cheeks ruddy beneath the beard. "River ice," he muttered, picking up the stone. "Just the ice." He sat back down, but his hands were shaking. He did not hum for the rest of the day. The sleeping arrangements were the hardest negotiation. There was only one bed. It was narrow, built of rough-hewn pine. In the beginning, Jonah took the floor. He laid his bedroll on the hearthstones, wrapped in his buffalo coat. But the cold of the high country was an insidious thing. It seeped through the floorboards. It radiated from the walls. One night, the temperature dropped so low that the water in the bucket inside the cabin froze solid. Anna woke to the sound of Jonah's teeth chattering. It was a rapid, clicking sound in the dark. "Jonah," she whispered. He did not answer. He was curled in a tight ball, shivering violently. Anna sat up. The air in the room bit at her exposed skin. She knew what hypothermia looked like. She had seen it in the tenements back east when the coal ran out. "Jonah, get up," she said, her voice sharp with fear. He groaned, a low sound of misery. "I am fine. You are freezing. You will not wake up if you stay there. Get in the bed." "No, it is not a request," Anna said. "We have to share the heat. It is common sense." She heard him sit up, the rustle of his heavy coat. He hesitated for a long time. Then, stiffly, he stood and moved toward the bed. He did not take off his coat. He lay down on the very edge of the mattress, as far from her as the narrow frame allowed. He was rigid, his body a straight line of tension. Anna lay back, pulling the heavy quilts over both of them. The heat from his body was immediate. He was like a furnace. Anna felt the warmth seep into her own chilled limbs. But with the warmth came an acute, agonizing awareness. They were inches apart. She could smell the pine resin on his skin, the scent of wood smoke in his hair. She could feel the slow, deep rise and fall of his chest. His hand lay on the quilt between them. In the dim light from the dying fire, she saw it tremble. Not from cold this time, but from a supreme effort of control. He curled his fingers into a tight fist, anchoring himself. "I will not touch you," he whispered. His voice was hoarse, strained. "Unless you ask." It was a promise, and it was a barrier. It was the most honorable thing anyone had ever said to her, and yet, in the dark, it felt like a wall of glass. "I know," Anna whispered back. They lay there in the silence, listening to the wind howl outside. Two outcasts sharing warmth in a frozen world, neither daring to move. The restraint was heavy in the air, a physical weight. It was its own kind of intimacy, sharper and more terrifying than touch. Weeks bled into a month. The calendar in Anna's head became hazy, marked only by the dwindling supply of flour and the height of the snow. One afternoon, the light in the cabin was better than usual. The storm had broken, leaving a flat, white glare outside. Jonah was sitting near the window, trying to stitch a tear in his buckskin shirt. His large hands were clumsy with the small needle. "Here," Anna said, holding out her hand. "Let me—" He looked up, surprised, then handed her the shirt. He sat in his undershirt, the wool gray and thin. As Anna worked on the leather, she glanced at him. The undershirt had ridden up slightly on his side. There, tracing the line of his ribs, was a jagged, purple scar. It looked like the earth after a plow had ripped through it. She stopped sewing. She reached out, her fingers hovering near the mark. "What happened here?" she asked softly. Jonah looked down. He pulled the shirt down quickly, covering the skin. "Old trouble," he said. Anna waited. She did not look away. She simply sat with the needle in her hand, offering him her silence. Jonah sighed. He leaned his head back against the logs, staring up at the ceiling. 17, he said. "I was 17. The night the men came." He nodded. "They wanted the water rights to the creek. My father said no. They came back with torches and rifles. They fired into the cabin to drive us out." His voice was flat, detached, as if he were reading a report from a stranger. "A bullet took a piece of my rib. I didn't feel it. Not then. I was too busy trying to get the door open. The beam had fallen." He stopped. His throat worked. "My mother. She was screaming my name. Not because she was afraid to die, but because she wanted me to run. She wanted me to leave them." He looked at Anna then, and the pain in his eyes was so raw she almost looked away. "I ran," he said. "I ran into the trees, and I watched it burn. I have been running ever since." Anna set the shirt down. The room was very quiet. The fire popped. A small explosion of sparks. "I worked in a textile mill," she said, "in Philadelphia." Jonah looked at her, listening. "There was a supervisor," she said, "Mr. Henderson. He had a gold watch and a wife who sat in the front pew at church. He liked to catch the girls in the stairwell between shifts. She picked at a loose thread on her skirt. He would corner us. He would put his hands where they didn't belong. He said if we screamed, we would be fired. And if we were fired, we starved." She looked up at Jonah. "One night, he cornered me on the loading dock. It was late. He smelled of brandy. He said he could make me a floor manager if I was kind." Anna's hands were shaking. She clenched them in her lap. "I hit him," she said. "I hit him with a bobbin. I split his lip. I ran home, and I told Sarah we had to leave. We had to leave right then. That is why we came west. I wasn't chasing a dream. Jonah, I was running, too." Jonah looked at her. The judgment she feared was not there. Instead, there was a deep, dark recognition. He reached out and covered her clenched hands with his own. His palm was rough, calloused, and warm. "We are still here, Anna," he said. "He did not break you." "No," she whispered. "He did not." The silence that followed was not empty. It was thick with shared understanding. They were two people carrying the weight of the past, stumbling through the snow together. The intimacy of their stories changed the air in the cabin. The tension grew, but it was different now. It was not just the tension of strangers. It was the tension of wanting. It came to a head over a kettle of boiling water. Anna was lifting the heavy iron pot from the hook. The handle slipped in her grip. The water sloshed over the rim, scalding her hand. She cried out, dropping the kettle with a clang. Jonah moved before the sound had faded. He was there, grabbing her wrist, his grip sure and tight. "Come," he ordered. He dragged her to the bucket of snowmelt by the door and plunged her hand into the icy water. "Keep it there," he said, his voice rough with alarm. He knelt beside her, his hand still holding her wrist underwater, his thumb circling the bone of her wrist, checking the skin. "Does it burn?" he asked. "A little," Anna breathed. She looked at him. He was kneeling so close his knee brushed hers. His head was bent over her hand, his hair falling forward. She could smell the soap he had used that morning, her sister's soap. He looked up. Their faces were inches apart. Time seemed to stop. The wind outside ceased its howling. The only sound was the harsh intake of their breath. Jonah's eyes searched hers. They were not cold anymore. They were wide, dark, and hungry. He looked at her mouth. His gaze was a physical touch. Anna felt her heart hammering against her ribs. She leaned in, just a fraction. She saw his pupils dilate. He leaned in too, his hand tightening on her wrist in the water. Pop! A log in the fire shifted and cracked loud as a pistol shot, sending a shower of sparks onto the hearthrug. They jerked apart as if they had been electrocuted. Jonah scrambled back, nearly knocking over the water bucket. He stood up, breathing hard. His face flushed a deep red. The fire, he stammered. I have to check the fire. He turned his back on her, grabbing the poker and attacking the logs with unnecessary force. Anna stayed kneeling by the bucket, her hand numb in the water, her lips tingling with the ghost of a kiss that hadn't happened. The weather broke 2 days later. The sky turned a brilliant, hard blue, and the sun came out, blindingly bright on the snow. We need wood, Jonah said, and we need to check the high ridge. They strapped on the snowshoes. Anna had learned to walk in them, a wide-legged, rolling gait that was exhausting but effective. They climbed out of the shadow of the spruce grove and up the slope. The air was crisp and thin, burning the lungs with its purity. When they reached the ridge, the world opened up. It was a frozen sea of peaks and valleys, stretching away to the horizon in endless waves of white and gray. The sun struck the snow crystals, turning the landscape into a field of diamonds. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. Anna laughed. She couldn't help it. The sound bubbled up out of her, breathless and surprised. Look at it, Jonah, she cried, pointing to the distant range. It goes on forever. She turned to him, her face flushed from the cold and the exertion, her eyes shining. Jonah was not looking at the mountains. He was looking at her. He stood with his hands jammed deep into the pockets of his coat. He looked at her flushed cheeks, her parted lips, the life that was blazing in her eyes. In that stark, unforgiving light, he looked like a man starving to death at a banquet. He wanted to touch her. The desire was a physical ache in his chest. He wanted to cross the 3 feet of snow between them and kiss the laughter from her mouth. He wanted to know if she tasted like the cold air or the warm fire. But he remembered the contract. He remembered the town. He remembered that she had paid $3 for him, and that any touch he initiated could be twisted into something ugly. He dug his hands deeper into his pockets, clenching his fists until the knuckles cracked. It is cold, he said, his voice tight. We should go back. Anna's smile faded slightly. She looked at him, puzzled by his sudden withdrawal. But she nodded. Yes, she said softly. Let's go home. The larder was empty. Anna scraped the bottom of the flour barrel. Her fingers came up with only dust. The beans were gone. The coffee was gone. Jonah had not caught anything in the traps for 3 days. We have to go down, Jonah said that evening. He was staring into the fire, his face grim. To town? Anna asked. To Harrow's trading post at the crossroads. It is closer. Can we afford it? I have some furs, Jonah said. Marten, fox. It will be enough for flour and bullets. He looked at her. I can go alone. You stay here. No, Anna said immediately. I am not staying here alone, not with the wolves howling every night, and not without you. Jonah frowned. People will talk. Anna, if we ride in together, they will see you with me. They will assume things. They will say you are my woman, in the worst way. Anna lifted her chin. She walked to the table and picked up her shawl. Let them talk, she said. They do not know us. They do not know who you are, and I do not care what they think of me. Jonah looked at her. Her courage shamed him, and it stirred a fierce, hot pride in his chest. She was small, and she was from the city, but she had a spine of steel. We leave at dawn, he said. The journey down was brutal, fighting through drifts that reached the mule's chest, but they reached the trading post by midday. It was a large log building that served as a supply depot for the mines. Men were lounging on the porch, despite the cold. When Anna and Jonah rode up, the conversation stopped. The silence was heavy and greasy. Eyes tracked them as Jonah helped Anna down from the mule. He kept his body between her and the men, his hand resting near his knife. They walked inside. The air was thick with tobacco smoke and the smell of raw furs. Harrow was there. The rancher was standing by the counter, examining a ledger. He looked up as they entered. His silver hair was perfectly combed. his suit immaculate. He looked out of place in the rough store, like a wolf in a silk vest. "Miss Cole," he said, smiling. He tipped his hat, and, "Mr. Wilder, I see you have survived the first storms. I am surprised." "We are here for supplies," Jonah said, his voice a low growl. Harrow ignored him. He kept his eyes on Anna. "You look thin, my dear. The mountains are hard on a woman's constitution." "I am fine, Mr. Harrow," Anna said coldly. "Are you?" Harrow took a step closer. "You know, my offer still stands. If you find the conditions too harsh, I have a guest room at the ranch, warm, civilized. You could sell the claim to me and go back east with a pocket full of gold. No one would think less of you." He glanced at Jonah with a sneer. "Certainly better than freezing to death in a shack with a convict." Anna stiffened. She stepped forward, placing herself in Harrow's line of sight, blocking Jonah. "Jonah is not a convict," she said clearly. "He is my partner, and I am not selling." Harrow's smile did not reach his eyes. "A partner, is that what we are calling it now?" From the back of the room, a drunken laugh rang out. A ranch hand, swaying on his feet, pointed a dirty finger at them. "Partner," he shouted. "That's a rich one." She paid $3 for a wild night, and now she can't get enough of the beast. The room erupted in snickers. Jonah went rigid. A sound tore out of his throat, a low animal snarl. His hands curled into fists, white-knuckled. He took a step toward the drunk, his shoulders bunching. The violence that had been dormant in him, the rage of 10 years of injustice, surged to the surface. He was going to kill the man. Anna saw it. He was going to tear him apart, and then the sheriff would come, and they would hang him. "Jonah!" Anna grabbed his arm. Her fingers dug into the buckskin sleeve. "Jonah, look at me." He stopped, his chest heaving, his eyes fixed on the drunk. "Jonah," Anna whispered. "Do not give them what they want. They want you to be the monster. Do not be the monster." She squeezed his arm, stepping in front of him, forcing him to look down at her. "Please," she said. "For me." Jonah blinked. He looked down into her face. He saw the fear there, but also the trust. She was not afraid of him. She was afraid for him. The red haze in his vision cleared. He took a shuddering breath. His fists slowly uncurled. He looked at the drunk, then at Harrow. He spat on the floorboards, inches from Harrow's polished boot. "We will take the flour," he said to the clerk. "And the coffee, he paid with the furs, throwing them on the counter." He did not look at Harrow again. He took the sacks, took Anna's elbow, and guided her out of the door. Behind them, the laughter died out, replaced by an uneasy silence. The ride back up the mountain was silent. The adrenaline faded, leaving them both exhausted. The shame of the encounter hung over them, a dark cloud. They reached the cabin after dark. The fire was dead. The room was freezing. Jonah rebuilt the fire without a word. He moved stiffly, his jaw still tight with suppressed rage. Anna made coffee. She brought him a cup where he sat by the hearth. He did not take it. He was staring into the flames, his hands clasping and unclasping. "I should have hit him," he muttered. "No," Anna said. She sat on the stool in front of him. "If you had hit him, they would have taken you." "Let them take me," Jonah said bitterly. "I am just a labor contract." "You are not," Anna said fiercely. "You are the only reason I am alive." She reached out and took his hand. He tried to pull away, but she held on. "Jonah, look at me." He looked at her. "Sit behind me," she said softly. "What? Sit behind me? My hair is tangled from the wind." Jonah hesitated. He looked at his rough hands, then at her. Slowly, the tension leaked out of his shoulders. He moved to the stool behind her. Anna sat on the hearth rug, leaning back against his legs. He reached out. His fingers were steady now. He began to unpin her hair, letting the heavy mass fall down her back. He combed through it, his touch deliberate and soothing. The rhythm of it calmed the storm inside him. He began to braid. This time, it was not the hesitant, awkward braiding of the first night in the cave. It was practiced. It was sure. He pulled the strands tight, weaving them together with a possessive care. Anna leaned her head back, closing her eyes. She felt the warmth of his body, the strength of his hands. He did not speak. He did not have to. The braid was a language of its own. It said, "I am here. I will stay. I will not let the world break us." When he finished, he tied the leather strip at the end. He did not pull away immediately. He let his hands rest on her shoulders, heavy and warm. Anna reached up and covered his hands with her own. They stayed like that for a long time in the firelight, the silence of the cabin wrapping around them like a shield, holding the world at bay. January of 1874 arrived not with a sunrise, but with a deepening of the gray twilight that had settled over the high country. The snow was no longer an event. It was the geography. It had buried the fence line, swallowed the woodpile, and crept halfway up the window panes of the cabin, turning the world inside into a dim, amber-lit cave. The cabin, once a symbol of survival, had begun to feel like a cage. The air was stale, recycled through the lungs of two people who had nowhere else to go. It smelled of wood smoke that never quite cleared, of damp wool drying by the fire, and of the sharp, metallic scent of anxiety. Outside, the wilderness pressed against the logs. At night, the wind carried the sound of the wolf pack patrolling the tree line. Their howls were not the lonely, mournful cries of autumn, but the sharp, synchronized yips of hunting. In the mornings, Jonah would find their tracks circling the clearing, large, deep prints that said, clearly as any written sign, "We are hungry, and you are meat." Inside, the hunger was a different kind. The flour barrel was dangerously light. The dried beans were gritty and tasteless. Jonah's trap lines were coming up empty, the animals either frozen in their burrows or taken by the wolves before he could reach them. The confinement wore away their politeness like sandpaper on soft wood. Jonah grew quieter. His silence, which Anna had once found steadying, now felt like a door slammed in her face. He would sit for hours by the fire, oiling his rifle, staring into the flames with a brooding intensity that made the small room feel crowded. When she asked him what he was thinking, he would grunt or offer a single word that explained nothing. Anna, in turn, became brittle. She cleaned things that were already clean. She paced the 3 steps from the table to the bed until Jonah snapped at her to sit down. She pushed him with questions, trying to pry open his thoughts, trying to bridge the distance that the cold had put between them. "Why do you check the latch 3 times?" she asked one evening, her voice sharp. "Because the wind works it loose," Jonah said without looking up. "It is not the wind," Anna said. "You are expecting something." "I'm expecting winter," Jonah said. "Leave it be." "Anna, I cannot leave it be when you look at the door like it is going to bite you." Jonah set the oil rag down hard on the table. "Do you want me to lie to you? Do you want me to say it is safe? It is not safe. We are 2 days from help and 10 feet under snow. Stop asking questions that have no good answers." The argument that finally broke the dam happened on a Tuesday, during a week when the wind had not stopped screaming for 4 days straight. Anna was trying to make a damper out of water and the last of the flour. Jonah was pacing, checking the window, checking the fire, checking the rifle. "You are making me nervous," Anna said, slamming the spoon down. "Will you please sit still?" "I am keeping watch," Jonah said. "Watch for what? The snow? The wolves? You treat this place like a fortress, and you treat me like a piece of luggage you have to guard." Jonah stopped pacing. He turned to her, his eyes dark with lack of sleep. "You are a burden, Anna. That is the truth of it. You do not know this land. You do not know what men like Harrow are capable of. If I stop watching, even for an hour, we lose." The word burden hung in the air, ugly and heavy. Anna felt the blood rush to her face. "I did not ask you to carry me. Jonah Wilder, I hired you. I paid for your time. I did not pay for you to treat me like a child. You paid $3, Jonah shouted, his voice cracking with a sudden, terrifying anger. "You think $3 buys you safety? You think it buys you the right to tell me how to keep us alive? You bought a man." "Anna, You bought his hands and his gun. You did not buy his peace of mind." Anna stood up, her own anger flaring hot enough to burn through the fear. "I bought your freedom," she shouted back. "Or have you forgotten that you were chained to a post?" "I have not forgotten," Jonas said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I am reminded every time I look at you, every time I eat your bread. I am a bought thing." He turned away, running a hand through his hair, his shoulders shaking. Anna watched him, her chest heaving. The anger drained out of her, leaving only a cold dread. She realized then that his rage was not about the flower or the pacing. It was fear. He was terrified of failing her, and he hated himself for being in a position where he owed her his life. "There is a paper," Anna said quietly. "The contract." Jonah stiffened. "I have it in my trunk," she said. "I have never really read it, not the whole thing." "Get it," Jonah said. Anna went to the foot of the bed and opened her trunk. She pulled out the folded, heavy paper the sheriff had given her. She handed it to Jonah. He took it to the lamp. He smoothed it out on the table, his large finger tracing the cramped, legal script. He read slowly, his lips moving slightly with the words. The silence stretched out. Then, Jonah let out a breath that sounded like a curse. "What does it say?" Anna asked. Jonah looked up. His face was pale beneath the weather-beaten tan. "It says," he began, his voice flat, "that I am bound to you for labor until the debt is satisfied. But here, paragraph 4, he pointed to a block of text near the bottom. In the event that the contract holder fails to maintain order, or displays an inability to manage the laborer in accordance with the interests of the township, the contract shall be nullified, and the laborer's service shall revert immediately to the appointed guardian of town interests." Anna frowned. "Who is the appointed guardian?" Jonah looked at her. "Harrow, he owns the bank. He sits on the town council. He is the guardian." The realization hit them both at the same time. It was a trap. It had always been a trap. The town had not laughed at Anna because she was foolish. They had laughed because they knew the game was rigged. They had let her pay the fine, let her buy the supplies, let her drag Jonah up the mountain. And they were waiting for her to fail, waiting for the winter to break her. And when it did, Harrow would get the land, and he would get Jonah. "He owns me," Jonah said, pushing the paper away as if it were filthy. "Whether I stay or go. If I leave you, I'm a fugitive. If I stay and we fail, I am his property." Anna felt sick. She sank onto the bench. "I did not know. Jonah, I swear." Jonah looked at her. The anger was gone from his face, replaced by a weary sadness. "I know," he said. "That is the cruelty of it. You thought you were doing a kindness, but out here, Anna, kindness is just another way to get caught in a snare." The contract lay between them on the table, a third presence in the room. It was no longer just a piece of paper. It was a shackle. But shared knowledge shifted the weight. They were no longer fighting each other. They were fighting the ink on the page. The thaw came as a false promise in early February. The sun came out, hard and bright, melting the top layer of snow into a slush that refroze at night into a sheet of ice. Jonah went out to check the fence line. He was gone for an hour. When he returned, his face was grim. "Come," he said. Anna put on her coat and followed him out. The air was biting, but the wind had died down. Jonah led her to the southern edge of the clearing, where the fence posts poked out of the drifts like broken teeth. He pointed to the snow. There were tracks, not the paw prints of wolves, but the deep, crescent-shaped gouges of shod hooves. A horse, a big one, and there were boot prints, several sets. They were here. Jonah said, "Last night, or early this morning." He walked to the corner post. He brushed the snow off the wood, freshly carved into the gray timber. Stark and white against the weathered grain was a brand, a stylized H. Harrow, Anna whispered. "He is marking it," Jonah said, "like a dog marking a tree. He is telling us he can come this close, and we won't even hear him. Why didn't they come to the cabin?" "Because they want us afraid first," Jonah said. "Fear makes people make mistakes. The next day, they did not have to look for tracks. Anna was washing dishes in a bucket of snowmelt when the sound of horses snorting drifted across the clearing. Jonah was at the window instantly, the rifle in his hands. 2 of them, he said, riders. He opened the door and stepped out onto the small porch. Anna wiped her hands on her apron and followed him, her heart hammering against her ribs. The riders were sitting their horses just beyond the fence. They were heavily bundled in sheepskin coats, their hats pulled low. Anna recognized one of them, the man from the saloon who had made the joke about raw meat. "Morning," the man called out. His voice was too loud, too cheerful. "What do you want?" Jonah asked. He did not lower the rifle. "Just checking on the lady," the man said, grinning. "Mr. Harrow was worried. Terrible storms we have been having. Wanted to make sure you hadn't frozen to death." "We are fine," Anna said, stepping up beside Jonah. "You can tell Mr. Harrow we are quite comfortable." The rider's eyes shifted to Jonah. He looked him up and down with open contempt, lingering on the rifle, then on the worn buckskins. "Comfortable, are you?" The rider laughed. "Well, that is good, though I hear there is some trouble with the paperwork." "What paperwork?" Anna asked. "The claim. Miss, seems the county clerk found some discrepancies. Seems your sister might not have filed the survey correctly. Mr. Harrow is contesting the deed." "That is a lie," Anna said. "I have the tax receipts." The rider shrugged. "I am just the messenger, ma'am. But if I were you, I would come down to town and sort it out before the sheriff has to come up here and evict anyone." He looked at Jonah again. "Or repossess anyone." Jonah took a step forward. The snow crunched under his boot. "Get off this land," he said. His voice was low, a rumble like distant thunder. The second rider shifted his hand toward his hip, hovering near the butt of his pistol. The air in the clearing went tight, vibrating with the potential for violence. "You watch your tone, boy," the first rider sneered. "You are speaking to free men, not property." Jonah's knuckles turned white on the rifle stock. "I said ride out," Jonah snarled, "or I will bury you where you sit." "Gentlemen," Anna shouted. She stepped in front of Jonah, blocking his line of fire. She looked up at the riders, her chin high. "We will come to town," she said. "As soon as the weather holds, we will clear this up with the judge." The rider tipped his hat, mocking. "Best make it soon, miss. The law does not like to wait." He wheeled his horse around. The 2 men rode off, their laughter drifting back on the cold air. Jonah watched them go, his chest heaving. "You should have let me shoot them," he said. "No," Anna said, her hands shaking. "If you shoot them, we lose. That is what they want. We have to go down there," Anna said, turning to him. "We have to see the judge." "No," Jonah said. He turned and walked back into the cabin, slamming the door. Anna followed him. "Jonah, we cannot stay here and wait for them to come back with the sheriff. We have to fight this legally." "Legally?" Jonah spun around. "There is no law down there. Anna, there is only Harrow. He owns the judge. He owns the clerk. If we go down there, we are walking into a cage." "So what is the alternative?" Anna cried. "We stay here? We shoot anyone who comes near? That makes us outlaws. Jonah, that makes you exactly what they say you are." Jonah stared at her. "I would rather be an outlaw than a slave." "I will not let them take you," Anna said. "I promise you. But we have to see those records. If there is a discrepancy, I need to see it. My sister was careful. She would not have made a mistake." Jonah looked at her, his expression torn between fear and a reluctant admiration for her stubbornness. He knew she was naive. He knew she believed in a justice that did not exist west of the Mississippi. But he also knew that if he refused, she would try to go alone. "We go," he said finally, "but we take the guns. And we do not sleep in town." The ride down the mountain was a silent, tense affair. The mule picked its way through the drifts, Anna clutching the saddle horn, Jonah walking ahead with the rifle across his shoulder. When they rode into Granite Creek, the town felt different. The hostility was no longer a vague atmosphere. It was a physical weight. People stopped on the boardwalks to watch them pass. There were no catcalls this time, only whispers and hard stares. They tied the mule in front of the courthouse. Jonah checked the load in his rifle before sliding it into the scabbard. He kept his pistol tucked into his belt, hidden by his coat. Inside, the courthouse was warm and smelled of stale tobacco smoke. Judge Vance was on the bench, looking bored. Harrow was sitting at the plaintiff's table, looking entirely too comfortable. "Ah, Miss Cole," the judge said, peering over his spectacles. "You decided to join us. I am here to see the claim records," Anna said, walking to the front of the room. "I was told there is a dispute." Harrow stood up. He held up a sheaf of papers. "No dispute, really," he said smoothly. "Just a correction. It appears your sister sold the upper water rights and the timber claim to me 3 months before she died. That is impossible," Anna said. "Sarah never mentioned a sale." "She was ill," Harrow said with feigned sympathy. "Perhaps she forgot." "But the signature is here." He handed the papers to the judge, who glanced at them and nodded. "Looks in order," Vance said. "Let me see," Anna demanded. The judge slid the papers across the bench. Anna picked them up. Her hands were trembling. She scanned the document. It was a bill of sale, dated February of 1873. The handwriting at the top was strange, stiff legalese. But at the bottom, it was Sarah's signature. The loop of the S, the sharp cross of the T. It was her sister's hand. But then Anna looked closer. The ink on the signature was slightly different than the ink on the body of the text. And there were lines added, clauses about water rights squeezed into the margins in a cramped hand that was definitely not Sarah's. "You altered this," Anna said, looking up at Harrow. "That is her signature, but you wrote the rest of this afterward. She signed a blank page. Or you cut this from another letter." Harrow laughed softly. "A serious accusation, Miss Cole." "Do you have proof? It is a forgery," Anna cried, turning to the judge. "Can't you see the difference in the ink?" The judge squinted. "Looks all the same to me. The claim stands. Mr. Harrow holds the title to the timber and the water. You retain the cabin and the acre immediately surrounding it. The cabin is useless without the land," Anna said. "That is not the court's concern." The judge said. Harrow leaned forward, resting his hands on the railing. "There is another matter. Judge," Harrow said, "the matter of the prisoner." He looked at Jonah, who was standing by the door, his back to the wall, his eyes scanning the room. "Mr. Wilder's contract requires him to be supervised by a person of moral standing," Harrow said. "Are you questioning my morals?" "Mr. Harrow?" Anna asked, her voice icy. Harrow smiled. He looked at the crowd that had gathered in the back of the room. "Well, miss, you have been up there alone with him for 3 months. A young woman, a wild man. And you paid for him yourself." He paused for effect. "Folks are wondering if he is working the land, or if he is just keeping you warm." The room erupted. It was the same laughter as before, but sharper, dirtier. Men nudged each other. The judge did not bang his gavel. Anna felt the blood drain from her face. She felt naked. The humiliation burned her skin like acid. She looked at Jonah. He was vibrating with rage. His hand was inching toward his coat. Anna straightened her spine. She turned to face the room. "You are small men," she said. Her voice was not loud, but it cut through the laughter. She pointed at Harrow. "You steal land from dead women and you slander the living because you are afraid." She walked over to Jonah and stood beside him. She placed her hand on his arm. "This man," she said, her voice ringing out, "has treated me with more honor and more respect in 3 months than any of you have shown in your entire lives. He has braided my hair. He has built my fire. He has slept on a stone floor to give me a bed." She looked Harrow in the eye. "He is twice the man you are, Mr. Harrow, and he is not for sale." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of shock. A woman did not speak like that. A woman did not defend a convict against a rich man. Jonah looked down at her. His heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He felt a surge of pride so fierce it almost brought him to his knees. She had claimed him. Not as a servant, but as a man. He stepped forward. He moved in front of Anna. "You heard the lady," Jonah said. His voice was a low growl, dangerous and deep. He looked at Harrow. "You are a liar, Harrow, and a thief." Harrow's face turned purple. "Sheriff," he barked. "Arrest him, threatening a court officer." Sheriff Miller stepped forward, his hand on his gun. "Jonah, stand down, or you go back in the chains." Jonah looked at the sheriff. Then he looked at Harrow's men, who were spreading out along the back wall, hands on their pistols. He calculated the odds. He could take 2 of them, maybe 3, but Anna was standing right behind him. If the shooting started, she would be caught in the crossfire. The power of the town pressed down on him, heavy and suffocating. He was strong, but he could not fight an army. He slowly raised his hands, palms open. "We are leaving," Jonah said. "We are done here." He grabbed Anna's hand. He did not ask for permission. He pulled her toward the door, shouldering past a miner who stood in the way. They walked out into the cold street, the door banging shut behind them. They could not make it back up the mountain before dark. The clouds were gathering again, heavy with snow. They had to stay at the boarding house. The landlady took Anna's money with a sniff of disdain, giving them a room on the 2nd floor. It was the only room left. It was a box, barely big enough for the bed and a washstand. The walls were paper-thin. From downstairs, the noise of the saloon drifted up, the tinny piano, the shout of a card game, the heavy thud of boots. Anna sat on the edge of the bed. She was shaking. The adrenaline of the courthouse was crashing, leaving her hollowed out. Jonah stood by the window, staring down at the street. He had pushed the heavy dresser in front of the door. "They will come for us," Jonah said quietly. "Not tonight, but soon. Harrow cannot let that stand. You humiliated him." "I told the truth," Anna whispered. Jonah turned to look at her. The lamplight cast deep shadows across his face. "You defended me," he said. "No one has ever done that. I meant it." Anna said every word. She looked up at him. Her eyes were dark and wide. Jonah crossed the room. He stopped in front of her. The air in the small room suddenly felt very thin. The anger of the day, the fear of the men with guns, the shame of Harrow's words. It all swirled together into a desperate, frantic need. They were alone in a hostile world. The only safe thing was the person standing right there. Jonah reached out. He cupped her face in his rough hands. His thumbs traced her cheekbones. "Anna," he breathed. She stood up. She stepped into him. Her hands went to his waist, clutching the wool of his coat. He kissed her. It was not a gentle kiss. It was desperate. It tasted of fear and hunger. His mouth was hot and hard on hers. Anna opened to him, a sound escaping her throat that was half sob, half moan. His arms went around her, crushing her against him. She felt the hard muscle of his chest, the heat of him burning through the layers of clothes. She wanted him. She wanted to forget the town, the contract, the winter. She wanted to be consumed. They stumbled backward until Anna's legs hit the edge of the bed. They sank down onto the mattress, the springs creaking loudly. Jonah was over her, his weight heavy and wonderful. His hands were in her hair, pulling the pins loose, frantic to feel the silk of it. Anna's hands were on his face, in his beard, pulling him closer. The hunger rushed up like a wildfire. It was blinding. Then, through the thin wall, a man's voice laughed. A crude, ugly sound. "She bought herself a man." Jonah froze. His breathing was ragged, harsh gasps that filled the small room. He looked down at her. His eyes were black with desire, but behind the blackness, there was agony. He pushed himself up. He rolled away from her, sitting on the edge of the bed. His back bowed. "Jonah?" Anna whispered, reaching for him. "No," he rasped. He stood up, walking to the far wall. He braced his hands against the plaster, his head hanging low. "I cannot," he said. "Why?" Anna asked, her voice trembling. "Because of what he said." Jonah said, "Because if I take you now, here, in this town, then I am just what they say I am. I am just the man you bought." He turned to look at her. His face was ravaged. I will not let the world say you paid $3 for this. I will not let them make you a whore in their stories. Anna sat up, pulling her dress together. Jonah, when it happens, Jonah said, his voice fierce and quiet, it will be because we chose it. Freely, in our own house, not here, not with them listening. He looked at her with a longing that was almost painful to witness. You deserve better than a quick tumble in a boarding house with a convict. Anna looked at him. She saw the pride that held him together. She saw the love that made him deny himself the one thing he wanted most. It was a refusal more intimate than any surrender could have been. She stood up. She walked to him and laid her head against his back. She wrapped her arms around his waist. Okay, she whispered into his coat. Okay. They stood like that for a long time, listening to the town below them, holding each other up. Morning brought a gray, sullen light and a new delay. When Anna went to the clerk's office to pay the tax on the cabin, the clerk, a nervous man with ink-stained fingers, would not look her in the eye. I'm sorry, Miss Cole, he mumbled. There is a clerical error. The file has been misplaced. I cannot accept payment until the file is found. Misplaced? Anna asked. Or hidden? The clerk just shook his head. Come back next week. It was a stall. Harrow was keeping the claim in limbo, keeping the threat hanging over their heads. They walked out of the office. Harrow was standing on the boardwalk across the street. He was smoking a cigar. When he saw them, he smiled, a slow, wolfish showing of teeth. He tipped his hat. Jonah took Anna's arm. Don't look at him. Walk. They retrieved the mule and rode out of town. The silence of the morning was heavy. As they reached the tree line where the road turned into the trail, Jonah stopped. He looked back. Below them, 3 riders had just left the stable. They were not riding fast. They were keeping a steady distance, matching their pace. Shadows. Jonah said, They are following us. They are making sure we go back to the cage. Jonah said, And they are waiting for the order to close the door. He turned back to the trail. We have work to do. Back at the cabin, the atmosphere had changed. It was no longer a home. It was a bunker. They did not unpack the supplies immediately. Instead, Jonah began to move the woodpile. What are you doing? Anna asked. Cover, Jonah said. He stacked the heavy logs against the front wall of the cabin, building a waist-high barricade on the porch. He cleared the snow away from the windows, checking the lines of sight. He brought the rifle inside and sat at the table. He dismantled it, cleaning every spring, every screw. He counted his bullets. 40 rounds, he said. It is not enough for a siege. He looked at Anna. If they come, he said, you go to the root cellar. You take the pistol. You do not come out. No matter what you hear, I am not hiding in a hole while you fight, Anna said. You will hide, Jonah said, because if they take me, they hang me. If they take you. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The winter sun went down behind the peak, casting long blue shadows across the snow. The cabin felt fragile, a tiny wooden boat on a dark and violent ocean. Anna watched Jonah reassemble the rifle. The click of the metal was loud in the silence. Their lives were balancing on a knife edge now. On one side was the wild, brutal nature of the mountain. On the other was the civilized cruelty of men. And they were standing in the middle, with nothing but 40 bullets and $3 worth of hope. The February thaw arrived like a fever breaking, sudden, wet, and messy. The hard-packed snow that had imprisoned the cabin for months turned into a gray slurry of slush. The ground beneath, frozen as iron for so long, softened into a treacherous, sucking mud that clung to boots and hooves alike. Icicles fell from the eaves with the sound of shattering glass, and the creek below the ridge swelled, its roar growing louder, angry with the meltwater. Jonah stood on the porch, testing the air. It smelled of wet pine and rotting leaves, the scent of the earth waking up hungry. I need to check the traps along the lower creek, he said, pulling on his heavy coat. The ice bridges will be rotting out. If I do not pull the iron now, we will lose it to the mud. Anna looked up from the hearth, where she was nursing a reluctant fire with damp wood. Will you be long? 2 hours, Jonah said. Keep the door barred. He took his rifle, his snowshoes strapped to his back in case the mud gave way to deep drifts in the shade. He did not kiss her goodbye. They had not crossed that line yet, but he lingered for a moment in the doorway, his gray eyes sweeping over her face as if memorizing it. Then he turned and strode out into the slush, vanishing into the line of spruce trees. Anna barred the door. She went back to her mending, trying to ignore the nervous flutter in her stomach that rose every time he left her alone. The cabin felt too big without his silent, brooding presence filling the corners. An hour passed, then another. The silence of the afternoon was heavy, broken only by the drip of meltwater from the roof. Then, the dogs began to bark. Not dogs. There were no dogs here. Anna froze, her needle hovering over the fabric. It was men barking, laughter, shouts, the sound of horses splashing through the muck of the clearing. She moved to the window, staying low. Through the gap in the shutters, she saw them. 3 riders. Their horses were blowing hard, their coats matted with mud. The men were passing a bottle between them, swaying in their saddles. They were Harrow's men. She recognized the sheepskin coats, the casual arrogance of their posture. One of them, a man with a scarred lip she had seen in the saloon, rode his horse right up to the porch steps. The animal's hoof struck the wood with a hollow thud. "Knock, knock," the man shouted, his voice slurred and thick. "Anyone home in the little love nest?" The other men laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Come on out." "Miss Cole," the second man called. "We saw the wild man leave. We know you are lonesome in there." Anna's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She moved to the table and picked up the rifle Jonah had left for her, the Heavy Sharp's carbine. It was too heavy for her, really, but she gripped the cold walnut stock until her knuckles turned white. She stayed silent. Maybe they would think she was gone. Maybe they would leave. The man with the scarred lip swung down from his saddle. He landed heavily in the mud. He walked up the steps, his spurs jingling. He tried the latch, barred. He yelled to his friends. Playing hard to get, he pounded on the door with his fist. The wood shuddered. "Open up, darling. We have news. Did you know your contract is being transferred? Mister, Harrow bought the paper this morning. That means your pet monster belongs to us now. And since you are squatting on Harrow's land, well, I guess that makes you part of the inventory too." The menace in his voice was playful, which made it terrifying. It was the playfulness of a cat with a mouse it intends to tear apart slowly. Anna leveled the rifle at the door. "Go away," she shouted. Her voice shook, but she forced it loud. "I am armed." "Oh, she is armed," the man on the horse mocked. "Did you hear that, boys? The little lady has a pop gun. I reckon we should teach her some manners," the man on the porch growled. "Teach her she can't keep property that isn't hers." He threw his shoulder against the door. The wood groaned. Dust sifted down from the frame. He hit it again, harder. The bar jumped in its brackets. "Open the door, or I will kick it in, and then we will have a real party." Anna didn't think. She didn't breathe. She aimed the rifle not at the door, but at the window frame to the right, just above where the man on the horse was sitting. She squeezed the trigger. The boom was deafening in the small space. The recoil slammed the stock into her shoulder, bruising the bone. The window shattered. A chunk of wood formed the outer frame, exploded outward, sending splinters flying. Outside, the horse reared, screaming. The man in the saddle cursed, fighting to stay on as his mount bucked in the mud. The man on the porch scrambled backward, slipping on the wet wood and falling hard onto his back in the slush. "You crazy witch!" he screamed, scrambling to his feet, mud covering his coat. "She shot at me!" Anna worked the lever, ejecting the spent shell and chambering a fresh round. The metallic clack-clack was loud and unmistakable. "The next one goes through the door," she screamed. The men scrambled for their horses. They were bullies, and like all bullies, they were cowards when the victim bit back. They hadn't expected a fight. They had expected a terrified girl. "Let's go," the third man yelled, wheeling his horse around. "She's crazy!" The man with the scarred lip mounted his horse, glaring at the cabin with pure hatred. "You wait!" he shouted, his voice shaking with rage. You wait until that dog of yours is gone for good. We will come back, and we will burn this whole place down with you in it." They spurred their horses, tearing out of the clearing in a spray of mud and ice. Anna stood in the center of the room, the rifle still raised, listening to the hoofbeats fade. When silence returned, her legs gave way. She sank to the floor, the heavy gun clattering beside her, and buried her face in her hands. Jonah returned an hour later. He saw the broken window. He saw the churned mud in the yard. He saw the splinters on the porch. He burst through the door, his chest heaving, his eyes wild. "Anna!" She was sitting at the table, staring at her hands. She looked up. She was pale, but she was dry-eyed. "I'm fine," she said. Jonah crossed the room in 2 strides. He gripped her shoulders, his hands shaking. He looked her over for blood, for bruises. "Who?" he demanded. His voice was a low snarl. "Harrow's men, 3 of them. Did they touch you?" "No. I fired a warning shot. They ran." Jonah let go of her. He turned away, pacing the small room like a caged tiger. A dark, terrifying rage was radiating off him. It wasn't just anger. It was the accumulated fury of 10 years. It was the memory of his sisters. It was the memory of the chains. It was the realization that no matter where he ran, the wolves would always find the door. "I will kill them," he said. The words were flat, devoid of emotion, which made them worse. He moved to the door, grabbing his rifle. "I know their tracks. I can catch them before they reach the valley floor." "Jonah, no!" Anna cried. She jumped up and ran to him, grabbing his arm. He didn't stop. He was moving with the unstoppable force of a landslide. "Jonah, stop! Look at me!" He stopped on the porch. He looked down at her. His eyes were stranger's eyes, cold, dead, filled with murder. "They threatened you," he said. "They came to my house and they threatened you. If you go after them, you are dead," Anna said, gripping his coat. "There are 3 of them. And if you kill them, the sheriff will hang you. Is that what you want? To leave me here alone?" "I am dead anyway," Jonah said. "Harrow has the contract. It is only a matter of time. Better I take some of them with me." "And what about me?" Anna shouted. "What happens to me when you are swinging from a rope? Do you think they will leave me alone then?" Jonah flinched. The red haze in his eyes cleared. "Just a fraction. You are the only thing standing between me and them. Jonah, not your gun. You. If you ride out there now, you are doing exactly what Harrow wants. You are becoming the wild animal they say you are." Jonah looked at the mud, churned up by the hooves of the men who wanted to destroy him. He looked at the broken window. His chest heaved with the effort of holding back the violence. He dropped the rifle to his side. He let out a long, shuddering breath. "They will come back. Anna," he whispered. "I know," she said, "but not tonight." She took his hand. It was cold and rough. She led him back inside and barred the door. Night fell early, bringing the wind back with it. The temperature plummeted, freezing the mud into jagged ridges. Inside the cabin, the air was thick with unspent adrenaline. Neither of them could eat. Jonah sat by the fire, staring into the flames, his body rigid. Anna sat on the bed, watching him. The fear was gone, replaced by a raw, aching vulnerability. They had come so close to the edge today. Death had knocked on the door, and they had barely held it shut. The silence stretched out, taut as a bowstring. "Jonah," Anna said softly. He looked at her. The firelight cast deep shadows in the hollows of his face. He looked exhausted, beaten down by the weight of always having to fight. Anna stood up. She walked across the room. She stopped in front of him. She reached out and touched his face. Her fingers trembled slightly against his beard. He didn't pull away this time. He closed his eyes, leaning into her touch with a desperation that broke her heart. "Anna," he rasped, "you should not be here. You should be safe." "I am safe," she whispered. "I am with you." She leaned down and pressed her mouth to his. It was not a hesitant kiss. It was a collision. Jonah made a sound low in his throat, a groan of surrender. His arms came up, wrapping around her waist, pulling her down to him. He buried his face in her neck, breathing in the scent of her, the life of her. His hands were rough, frantic, moving over her back, her hair, as if checking that she was real, that she was whole. Anna pulled him up from the stool. They moved toward the narrow bed, stumbling in the dark. The clothes they wore, layers of wool and buckskin, armor against the cold, became obstacles to be shed. When skin finally touched skin, the shock of it was electric. Jonah hovered over her, bracing his weight on his elbows. He looked down at her in the dim amber light. He looked terrified. "Are you sure?" he whispered. Anna reached up. She traced the scar on his shoulder, the mark of the bullet that had started his long, lonely war. "I choose this," she said. "I choose you." He kissed her then, and the world outside ceased to exist. There was no finesse in their lovemaking, no practiced seduction. It was urgent, messy, and deeply, achingly real. It was two people who had been starving for years finally sitting down to a feast. It was the roughness of his calloused hands against the softness of her skin. It was the salt of tears, his or hers, she couldn't tell, mingled with their kisses. It was a reclaiming. In the act of holding her, Jonah was not a convict or a wild man. He was just a man. And Anna was not a spinster or a victim. She was a woman claiming her own life. Later, as the fire died down to embers, they lay tangled together under the heavy quilts. The wind rattled the shutters, a reminder that the siege was not over, but here, in the small, warm space of the bed, there was a fragile sanctuary. Jonah's arm was heavy across her, his breathing deep and even. Anna pressed her back against his chest, listening to the beat of his heart, and for the first time in months, she slept without dreaming of wolves. Morning arrived with a cruel indifference. The sky was a pale, hard blue, innocent of the violence of the day before. They woke slowly, reluctant to leave the warmth of the bed. But the habits of survival ran deep. The water bucket was empty. The fire needed wood. Jonah dressed first, pulling on his buckskins with a new heaviness in his movements. He leaned down and kissed Anna on the forehead, his hand lingering on her cheek. "I will check the spring," he said. "The melt might have muddied the water. I will be 10 minutes. He took the buckets and the rifle. Anna lay in bed for a moment longer, watching the dust motes dance in the shaft of sunlight coming through the broken window. She felt sore, tender, and fundamentally changed. She rose and dressed. Humming a snatch of a hymn, she began to fold the quilts. Then she smelled it. It wasn't the smell of the hearth fire. It was acrid, oily, the smell of burning pitch. She turned toward the door just as Jonah kicked it open. "Fire!" he screamed. "Get out!" He dropped the buckets and grabbed her, dragging her toward the door. Anna stumbled out onto the porch. The world was full of smoke. Thick, black clouds were rolling up from the back of the cabin. They had circled around. Jonah shouted, pulling her into the snow. While we were at the spring, they fired the back wall. The dry timber, seasoned by 50 years of wind and sun, had caught like tinder. Flames were already licking up the roof, orange tongues devouring the shingles. "My sister's things!" Anna screamed. She lunged back toward the door. The Bible, the letters, the dresses, everything that proved Sarah had existed. Jonah caught her around the waist. He hauled her back, his boots sliding in the mud. "No!" he roared. "It is too late! The roof is going! Let me go!" Anna fought him, clawing at his arms. "The box! I have to get the box!" With a sickening crack, the main beam of the roof gave way. The center of the cabin collapsed inward in a shower of sparks and flaming debris. Heat blasted outward, searing their faces. Anna stopped fighting. She sagged in Jonah's arms, watching the flames consume the doorway. They stood in the snow, shivering not from cold but from shock. As the cabin burned, the heat was intense, melting the snow around the foundation into a muddy ring. Anna felt something inside her snap. It was a quiet, sharp sound, like a dry twig breaking. This land was supposed to be a fresh start. It was supposed to be the place where she and Sarah built a life of peace. Now it was a charred ruin. It was a battlefield. Jonah stood behind her, his arms wrapped around her chest, holding her up. She could feel him shaking. "I should have seen them," he whispered into her hair. His voice was broken. "I should have been watching. It is not your fault," Anna said, but her voice sounded hollow to her own ears. "It is," he rasped. "It is my past. It is Harrow. If I had left you, if I had gone, they would not have done this." He released her and sank to his knees in the mud. He put his head in his hands. They watched until the walls fell in, until there was nothing left but a stone chimney standing like a tombstone in a pile of glowing coals. "We cannot stay here," Jonah said, his voice dull. "We will freeze tonight." "Where do we go?" Anna asked. "The old trapping cave," Jonah said. "Up the ridge. It is small, but it is dry." The cave was little more than a shallow scoop in the granite cliff face, protected by a screen of scrub oak. It had a soot-stained ceiling from fires burned years ago. It was miserable. They had the clothes on their backs. Jonah had his rifle and his knife. Anna had nothing. For 3 days, they existed in a state of suspended animation. Jonah hunted with a desperation that bordered on madness. He managed to shoot a scrawny hare, which they roasted over a smoky fire of green wood. They slept huddled together under Jonah's heavy coat and a pile of old furs he had stashed in the back of the cave years ago. The furs smelled of musk and mold. The closeness, which had been a joy in the cabin, was now a torment. They clung to each other for warmth, but the specter of what they had lost lay between them. They didn't speak of the lovemaking. It felt like a memory from another life. Something that had happened to 2 other people who still had a home. On the 4th night, Anna woke up with a sharp pain in her abdomen. She curled into a ball, biting her lip to keep from crying out. But the pain grew worse, a cramping, twisting agony that took her breath away. "Jonah?" she whispered. He was awake instantly. "What is it? I hurt," she said. His hand found her forehead. "You are burning up." By morning, the fever was high. Anna was drifting in and out of consciousness, and then the bleeding started. It was heavy and dark. Anna understood what was happening before Jonah did. She remembered the whispers of the women in the mill, a child, a possibility, a spark ignited in that one desperate, beautiful night, now being extinguished by the cold, the stress, the fear. She lay on the dirty furs, her body racked with tremors. Jonah knelt beside her, helpless. He boiled water in a flat stone he had hollowed out. He tore strips from his own shirt to clean her. His hands were covered in her blood. The grief was wordless. There was nothing to say. They had not even had time to imagine a child, to name it, to want it, and yet its loss felt like the final theft. Harrow had taken the land, the home, and now the future. By evening, the bleeding slowed. Anna lay pale and translucent against the dark furs, her eyes sunken. Jonah walked to the edge of the cave. He looked out at the empty, indifferent mountains. The sun was setting, painting the snow in shades of blood and violet. Something in him broke. He opened his mouth and screamed. It was a raw, animal sound. It ripped out of his throat, echoing off the granite cliffs, rolling down the valley. It was a scream of pure, undiluted pain. It was the sound of a man who had tried to be good, tried to be gentle, and had been crushed by the world for his trouble. He sank to his knees, his hands clawing at the frozen earth, his chest heaving with sobs. "Jonah!" The voice was weak. He turned. Anna had dragged herself to her elbows. "Come here," she whispered. He crawled to her. He buried his face in her lap, weeping like a child. "It is my fault," he choked out. "My blood, my curse." "No," Anna said. Her hand stroked his matted hair. "No, it was Harrow," she said. Her voice gained a sudden, steely edge. "It was Harrow who lit the fire. It was Harrow who drove us here." She lifted his head so he had to look at her. "I do not blame you. Jonah, I love you." Jonah looked at her, his eyes red-rimmed and hollow. Anna took a breath. She pushed herself up to a sitting position, wincing at the pain. "We are going back," she said. "Back?" Jonah asked. "Back where?" "There is nothing left. We are going to town," Anna said. Jonah shook his head. No, you are sick. They will kill us. I am not going to die in a cave. Jonah, and I am not going to let them win." She gripped his hand. Her grip was weak, but her eyes were burning with a feverish intensity. "I want him to look me in the eye," she said. "I want the whole town to know what he did. I want justice." "There is no justice," Jonah shouted. "Not for us. They will hang me. Anna, they will twist the story. They will say I burned the cabin. They will say I killed you." "Then let them try," Anna said. She looked at him. "Living like this, living like ghosts. It is not surviving. Jonah, it is just dying slowly. We owe it to Sarah. We owe it to what we lost today." Jonah looked at the blood on his hands. He looked at the woman who had lost everything because she had tried to save him. He knew she was right, and he hated it. He took a deep breath. He wiped his hands on the snow. "If we go down there," he said quietly, "we do not come back. Not until it is finished." "I know," Anna said. Jonah nodded. He stood up. He picked up his rifle. He looked at the setting sun. "Then we go," he said. "I will walk into hell with you." Anna. They left the next morning. They looked like wraiths. Their clothes were stained with soot and blood. Their faces were gaunt. They had no mule. It had run off during the fire. They had no supplies. Jonah supported Anna, his arm around her waist, taking the weight she could not bear. They walked down the mountain, leaving the blackened ruins of the cabin behind them. They did not look back. They moved with the grim determination of the dead who have business with the living. They were not a nervous woman and her hired man anymore. They were partners. They were a single, jagged weapon aimed at the heart of the town that had tried to break them. They walked into the tree line, and the shadows swallowed them whole. Granite Creek looked different when you walked into it with nothing left to lose. Anna Cole and Jonah Wilder came down the main street like wraiths summoned from the smoke that still stained the air above the southern ridge. Their clothes were blackened with soot and stiff with dried mud. Anna's face was hollow, her skin pale and translucent against the dark smudges of ash. Jonah walked beside her, his coat torn, his eyes sunk deep in his head, burning with a light that was not quite sanity and not quite fever. They did not look like a woman and her hired man. They looked like survivors of a shipwreck who had washed up on a hostile shore. The town stopped. The piano in the gem saloon fell silent mid-measure. Men wrestling beer barrels on the loading dock paused, wiping sweat from their brows to stare. Women shopping for dry goods pulled their children closer to their skirts. The silence that rippled down the muddy street was heavy with judgment and a flicker of unease. The Wilds had spat these two back out, and the townspeople did not know what to make of them. Harrow was waiting. He stood on the boardwalk in front of the bank, flanked by the 3 men who had ridden to the cabin 2 days prior. He was smoking a cigar, the ash long and gray. When he saw them, he did not look afraid. He looked amused. There was a challenge in the tilt of his head, an unmistakable arrogance in the way he tapped the ash onto the pristine wood of the boardwalk. "Alive. I see," Harrow called out. His voice carried easily in the quiet street. "We saw the smoke. A tragedy. Truly." Anna did not stop. She did not look at him. She kept her eyes fixed on the double doors of the courthouse at the end of the street. She walked with a mechanical rhythm, placing one boot in front of the other. Jonah walked on her right, placing his body between her and Harrow's men. His hand hung loose near the knife at his belt, the only weapon he had left. As the rifle had been lost in the confusion of the fire, he tracked the men with his eyes, a wolf measuring the pack. But he did not break stride. They reached the courthouse. Anna pushed the heavy doors open and stepped inside. Jonah stopped at the threshold. He remained just outside, a dark, formidable shadow leaning against the doorframe, watching the street, watching the room, guarding the rear. The courtroom was in session. Judge Vance was presiding over a dispute regarding a stolen saddle. When Anna walked down the center aisle, smelling of wet char and blood, the dispute ended. Judge Vance looked over his spectacles. "Miss Cole, you are disrupting my court. I am here to testify," Anna said. Her voice was raspy from smoke inhalation, but it did not waver. "Testify to what?" "The docket is full. To arson, Anna said. To attempted murder, to forgery. A murmur ran through the room. Miners and storekeepers shifted on the benches. The judge sighed, rubbing his temples. Miss Cole, we have discussed this. The land dispute is settled. Mr. Harrow holds the title. If you have suffered a misfortune with fire, that is a matter for the sheriff, not the bench. It was not a misfortune, Anna said, stepping closer to the railing. It was a siege. 3 men came to my cabin. They threatened me. They fired the house while we were at the spring. They burned everything I own. She turned to look at the room. My sister's Bible, her letters, the clothes on our backs. It is all gone. Harrow entered the room then, the heavy doors swinging shut behind him. He walked down the aisle with the confidence of a man who owned the floorboards. Your Honor, Harrow said smoothly. The woman is distraught. It is understandable. She has lost her home, but we must be careful with accusations. He stopped beside Anna, smelling of bay rum and money. The fire was likely an accident, Harrow continued, addressing the crowd more than the judge. Or perhaps not an accident at all. He turned his eyes to the back of the room, to the shadow in the doorway. We all know who she has been living with. A man with a history of violence. A man known to set fires when the rage takes him. Jonah stiffened in the doorway. That is a lie, Anna snapped. Is it? Harrow asked. He is unstable. Miss Cole, you said so yourself. He is a wild man. Perhaps he grew tired of the arrangement. Perhaps he snapped. It would not be the first time Jonah Wilder burned a house down with people inside. The cruelty of the lie took Anna's breath away. He was twisting Jonah's deepest trauma, using the death of his family as a weapon to destroy him. Judge Vance looked at Jonah. Sheriff, bring the prisoner forward. Sheriff Miller moved from the side of the room. He approached Jonah, unhooking a pair of iron cuffs from his belt. Anna moved to intercept him, but Harrow caught her arm. It is for your own good, my dear, Harrow said, his voice dropping to a whisper that only she could hear. You are free of him now. Do not be foolish. Let go of me, Anna hissed, wrenching her arm away. She turned to the judge. You cannot do this. You cannot arrest a man for a crime committed against him. I am not arresting him for the fire, the judge said. I am revoking his bond. Mr. Harrow, as the appointed guardian of town interests, has petitioned the court. He argues that under your supervision, order has not been maintained. The contract is void. His labor reverts to the guardian. Harrow smiled. It was a cold, triumphant thing. Secure him. Sheriff, Harrow ordered. Sheriff Miller reached for Jonah's arm. Don't, Jonah said. It was not a shout. It was a quiet command. Jonah stepped out of the shadow. He walked into the pool of light from the high windows. He did not raise his fists. He did not reach for his knife. He held his hands out, wrists together, and let the sheriff click the cuffs into place. Then he lifted his head. He looked at the judge. He looked at Harrow. He looked at the faces of the townspeople, the baker, the blacksmith, the women who had whispered about him in the street. I did not set the fire, Jonah said. His voice was rough, like gravel grinding together. It was the voice of a man who had not spoken to a crowd in 10 years. I did not set the fire 17 years ago either. The room went deadly quiet. My name is Jonah Wilder. He said, my father was Elias, my mother was Martha, my sisters were Sarah, Ruth, and Mary. He took a step forward, the chains clinking softly. We lived in Sweetgrass Valley. We built a cabin. We raised cattle. We bothered no one. He looked at an old woman in the second row, Mrs. Gable. He said, you remember my mother. She gave you a jar of honey when your husband broke his leg. The woman's hand went to her mouth. She nodded slowly. I remember. She whispered. I was 17. Jonah said, men came in the night. They wanted the water. They barred the door. His voice hitched, then steadied. I pulled my sisters out, but they were already gone. The smoke took them. He turned to Harrow. I ran because I was a boy, and I was afraid. I lived in the rocks because I did not trust men who wore suits and carried torches. I became wild because it was the only way to stay alive in a world that wanted me dead. He looked back at the crowd. I have never hurt a soul who did not try to hurt me first. I have trapped for fur. I have traded fairly. A voice spoke up from the back. It was Caleb, the young trapper. That is true, Caleb said. Standing up, he gave me a good price on marten skins last winter, and he pulled my mule out of a drift when I was stuck. Sit down. Caleb, Harrow snapped. No, the widow misses, Gable said, her voice quavering but distinct. I remember the honey, and I remember the night of the fire. People said it was the company men. They said the boy was a scapegoat. Harrow's face reddened. This is irrelevant. The man is a convict. I carried your husband home. Jonah said to Mrs. Gable, 5 years ago, in the blizzard of '69, he was frozen. I left him on your porch and knocked on the door. Mrs. Gable began to weep. I thought it was an angel, she sobbed. Or a ghost. I never knew it was you. The mood in the room shifted. It was a physical thing, like the pressure changing before a storm. The monster was shedding his skin, and a man was standing underneath. Anna stepped forward then. She walked to Jonah and placed her hand on his cuffed wrists. He braided my hair, she said. She looked at the men who had laughed at her in the saloon. You called him an animal. You made bets on whether I would come back alive. You laughed because I paid $3 for him. She scanned the room, meeting their eyes one by one. While you were down here, drinking your whiskey and making your jokes, this man was walking through snow up to his waist to find food. He was sleeping on a stone floor to give me a bed. He was washing my clothes when I was too sick to stand. She lifted her chin. He treated me with more honor, more gentleness, and more respect than any so-called gentleman I have met in this town. Or back east, she turned to Harrow. He is not the wild one. Mr. Harrow, you are the one who burns houses. You are the one who steals from women. You are the savage. Harrow slammed his hand on the railing. Enough. This is a court of law, not a prayer meeting. Judge, I demand you enforce the contract. Judge Vance looked uncomfortable. He shuffled his papers. Mr. Harrow has a point, he muttered. The law is clear regarding the contract, and the land title is... Excuse me, Your Honor. The voice was quiet, almost a squeak. It came from the side door. Mr. Abernathy, the clerk, stepped forward. He was clutching a heavy, leather-bound ledger against his chest. He looked terrified. He was sweating. What is it? Abernathy, the judge barked. I found the file. The clerk stammered. Miss Cole asked me to look again, for the original survey. He walked to the bench, avoiding Harrow's gaze. He opened the book. This is the county master record, he said, from 1871. He pointed to a line. Sarah Cole filed on the upper ridge. The entry is here. And the sale? The judge asked. Mr. Abernathy swallowed hard. There is no record of a sale in this book. Your Honor, the transfer document Mr. Harrow presented, it was dated February. But the page for February in the master book is full. There is no entry for Cole. He looked up, his face pale, and the ink on the transfer document. It is zinc-based. We did not get zinc ink in the supply shipment until June, 3 months after Sarah Cole died. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a lie shattering. Harrow stood frozen. The color drained from his face, leaving it gray. Let me see that, the judge demanded. He pulled the book closer. He looked at the entry. He looked at Harrow. Mr. Harrow? The judge said, his voice hard. Do you have an explanation? Harrow looked around the room. He saw the shift. He saw the miners glaring at him. He saw Mrs. Gable wiping her eyes. He saw the sheriff's hand move away from Jonah and rest on his gun belt. His mask slipped. The civilized businessman vanished, and the predator underneath snarled. It is a mistake, Harrow shouted. The clerk is incompetent. The ink does not lie. Mr. Harrow, Anna said quietly. Harrow spun on her. His eyes were wide and manic. You little witch, he hissed. You think you can come here and take what is mine? I built this town. I own this valley. He lunged. It was a desperate, foolish move. He reached for Anna, his hands hooked into claws, but he never reached her. Jonah moved. Even in chains, he was faster than thought. He stepped in front of Anna and met Harrow's charge with his shoulder. He slammed into the rancher, knocking the breath out of him. Harrow stumbled back, flailing. Harrow's hand went to his coat. He pulled a derringer, a small, silver hideout gun. "Gun!" someone shouted. Sheriff Miller drew his revolver. "Drop it! Harrow!" But Harrow was past listening. He raised the gun, aiming at Jonah's chest. Jonah did not flinch. He stood tall, shielding Anna with his body. "Shoot me, then," Jonah said, "and show them all what you are." Harrow's finger tightened on the trigger. Anna stepped out from behind Jonah. She moved directly into the line of fire, her chest touching the barrel of the small gun. "No!" Jonah roared, struggling against the chains. Anna looked Harrow in the eye. "Shoot me," she said, "if you want the land that badly. Kill me for it. Do it in front of everyone. Do it in front of the judge." Harrow stared at her. His hand shook. He looked at the crowd. Every face was turned against him. If he pulled the trigger, he would not leave the room alive. The illusion of his respectability was gone, stripped away by a clerk's ledger and a woman's courage. He lowered the gun. Sheriff Miller stepped in. He snatched the derringer from Harrow's hand. "That is enough," the sheriff said. The justice that followed was not perfect. It was the messy, compromised justice of the frontier. Harrow was not jailed. He was too rich, and he knew too many senators in the capital. He paid a massive fine for clerical irregularities and disturbing the peace. He walked out of the courthouse a free man, but he walked out alone. His men had melted away into the crowd. His reputation was cracked. The town no longer looked at him with fear, but with suspicion. But for Anna and Jonah, the victory was real. Judge Vance, eager to restore order and perhaps save his own reputation, voided the labor contract on the spot. He cited extenuating circumstances and the heroic conduct of the prisoner. He affirmed Anna's title to the land, including the timber and the water rights. They stood on the courthouse steps as the sun began to set, painting the muddy street in gold. "You are free," Anna said. Jonah looked at his wrists, rubbing the red marks where the cuffs had been. He did not look triumphant. He looked broken. He looked at Anna. She was dirty, exhausted, and homeless. "You have your land," Jonah said. "You can sell the timber rights to the mining company now. They will pay you a good price, enough to build a real house, enough to live in town." "I don't want to live in town," Anna said. Jonah looked away, staring at the distant mountains. "You should," he said. "Why?" "Because I am poison." "Anna?" The words were soft, filled with a terrible certainty. "Look at what happened. The fire. The threats. The gun in your face. It follows me. Violence follows me. If I stay, next time, I might not be fast enough. Next time, the roof might fall on you." He turned to her, his gray eyes pleading. "I cannot breathe when you are in danger. I cannot sleep. You need a storekeeper, or a farmer, someone who can give you peace." "I do not want peace," Anna said. "I want you." Jonah shook his head. He backed away. Down the steps. "Goodbye, Anna." He turned and walked away. He did not look back. He walked past the livery stable, past the last houses, and into the dusk. Anna watched him go. She felt the old panic rising, the fear of being alone, the fear of the vast, empty West. But then she remembered the braid. She remembered the heat of his back against hers in the snowstorm. She remembered the way he had stood in front of the gun. She didn't spend her last $3 on a hired hand. She didn't fight a town and a fire for a memory. She picked up her skirts and ran. "Jonah!" She screamed. He kept walking. He was already at the edge of the scrub oak, heading for the high trails. "Jonah Wilder!" She scrambled up the rocky slope, her boots slipping on the loose shale. Her breath tore at her throat. "Jonah!" She found him at the old trapping camp, a mile out of town. He was sitting on a flat rock, his head in his hands, looking like a man who had reached the end of the world. She skidded to a halt, gasping for air. "You do not get to decide for me," she wheezed. Jonah looked up. Misery was etched into every line of his face. "Go back. Anna, please. No," she said. She walked over to him. She grabbed the lapels of his torn coat and hauled him up. "You think you are saving me?" she demanded. "You think leaving me alone in this world is saving me? I am saving you from me." Jonah rasped. "I don't want to be saved from you. I chose you." She shook him, her small hands gripping the heavy wool. "I chose you when I signed that paper. I chose you when you braided my hair. I chose you when you held me through the fever. I chose you when I walked into that courthouse knowing they might hang us both." She looked up into his eyes, fierce and crying. "You are not a curse. Jonah, you are my home. And if you walk away now, you are burning us down just as surely as Harrow did." Jonah stared at her. The walls he had built around his heart, the walls of guilt, of shame, of the belief that he was unworthy of love, began to crack. He looked at this woman, this small, fierce, stubborn woman who had walked into hell for him and refused to leave. He let out a shuddering breath. "I have nothing," he whispered. "No house, no money, just these hands. That is all I ever wanted," Anna said. Jonah made a sound like a sob. He pulled her to him, wrapping his arms around her, burying his face in her hair. He held her as if she were the only solid thing in a spinning universe. "I am scared," he admitted, his voice muffled against her neck. "So am I," Anna said, "but we are scared together." They did not go back to town. They stayed at the trapping camp that night. The air was cold, smelling of pine and coming snow. They built a small fire in the old ring. Anna sat on a log, her hair tangled from the wind and the running. She was exhausted, her body aching, but her heart was light. Jonah moved behind her. He did not ask. He reached out and began to pull the pins from her hair. His hands were shaking slightly, but his touch was familiar. It was the touch that had saved her in the cave, the touch that had claimed her in the cabin. He combed through the knots with his fingers, patient and slow. "You need a new comb," he murmured. "I will carve you one, out of birch. I would like that," Anna said. He began to braid, over, under, over. The rhythm was a lullaby. It was a prayer. With every twist of the dark strands, he was weaving them back together. He was weaving a future. He tied the end with a strip of leather. Then he bent forward and rested his forehead against the back of her head. "I am staying," he whispered. "I know," Anna said. She reached up and covered his hands with hers. They did not rebuild on the ridge. The memories of the fire were too fresh, the ghosts too loud. Instead, they moved 2 valleys over, to a spot Jonah knew. It was a sheltered hollow with deep, black soil and a stream that ran clear and sweet all year round. They built the house with their own hands. It was hard, brutal work. They felled the trees, stripped the bark, and notched the logs. They mixed the mud for chinking. They split the shakes for the roof. They worked until their hands were blistered and their backs screamed. But they worked together. They laughed when the mud splashed their faces. They shared water from the same dipper. They slept on a bed of pine boughs under the stars until the roof was raised. It was not a fairy tale. The winter came again, as it always did. The wolves still howled. Harrow still held power in the town, though his shadow never touched their valley again. Prejudice did not vanish overnight. When they went to town for supplies, some people still crossed the street to avoid the wild man and the woman who had bought him, but others did not. Caleb, the trapper, brought them a side of venison during the first winter. Mrs. Gable sent a quilt she had stitched herself, and slowly, cautiously, the parents of the mining camp began to send their children to the valley, where Anna had opened a small school in the front room of the new cabin. Years passed. On quiet evenings, when the work was done and the sky turned a deep, bruising purple over the jagged peaks, Anna would bring a stool to the doorway. The air would smell of cooling earth, pine resin, and wood smoke. Jonah would come from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. He was older now, the gray in his beard matching the gray in his eyes. But his back was straight, and the wildness in him had settled into a quiet, deep strength. He would stand behind her. He would take the comb, the birch one, smooth from years of use, and he would run it through her hair, which was streaked with silver now. He would braid it. Their love was marked by scars. There were graves in the mountains. His sister's, her sister. There was the memory of the child they had lost, a shadow that sometimes sat with them by the fire. But their love was also stubborn. It was bright. It was a flame that had refused to be stomped out by boots or smothered by snow, in a world that had tried to buy and sell them, to define them by rumors and contracts and the color of their pasts. They had done the most dangerous thing of all. They had chosen each other. And in that choice, in the quiet rhythm of hands braiding hair as the stars came out over the vast, indifferent West, they found a freedom that no judge could grant and no sheriff could take away. Thank you for listening to the story of Anna and Jonah. It has been a journey through the snow and the fire, and I am grateful you walked this trail with me. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Are you in the mountains, the city, or somewhere in between? Please leave a comment below and let me know. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more tales of grit, romance, and the American frontier, please subscribe to From Wild West. Share your thoughts in English in the comments. I read every one of them. Until next time, keep your fire burning.